Welcome back to Homer Bound, a podcast where a couple of big old nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. I'm Llama.
And I am Wriste.
And y'all, we have made it to the end. This is our last episode on the books of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm surprised that we didn't need Athena to jump in and tell the fighting to stop. That's just like, at the end of the Odyssey, that's what happens, right? Like, I mean, spoilers, Athena, like the last lines are Athena jumping in like, stop the wars, stop the fighting, which is a nice little bookend because, at the first book of the Iliad, Athena has to do the same thing for Achilles, right? She has to stop the fighting.
Absolutely.
Thank goodness we have managed to get through this without hurting each other, hurting ourselves, and overall just having a good old time.
I mean, I've hurt myself several times, actually.
Oh yeah, well, I mean
that hasn't been on account of the podcast, though.
Not for any fault of my own.
I'm just terrible at remaining uninjured. Also, it's important to note this. I think this will not be our actual last episode. We're going to do a nice little episode 25 where we're going to wrap things up, have a little chat about how this all went, and I think that's going to be a really good time.
We'll talk about what we talked about.
But this is the big one. This is the last real time that we're getting together to discuss like the actual books. And that's exciting and in a way like a little bit sad. Much like, I think the content of these books is a little bit bittersweet. So yeah, that's crazy. We made it. It's good.
Yeah, we did. And when I proposed this to you, I wasn't totally sure what to expect out of the podcast. Obviously you're a giant nerd, you love reading, pretty smart, and I knew that we'd have some good conversations, but I wasn't totally sure like what they would be like or like how much this would, I don't know, help me see these works. I definitely have a lot to think about. And yeah, thanks for doing this.
Of course.
Again, this is the real last episode, so I should obviously save my thanks for later. But
oh yeah.
If you're just here for the Odyssey and the Iliad, then like this is where you stop. And like I don't want to hear another hour of these clowns talking afterwards. So
how dare they?
Even though you should.
We're awesome. I'm not biased or anything, but we're totally awesome. Yeah, I remember you asking me to do this, and I also remember telling you that I had to sleep on it because I was just like. I knew that a podcast is a big undertaking, which this has been. And so I had to kind of work around that in my mind a little bit. But for the most part, I just remember being really intrigued and thinking to myself, like, this could be a lot of fun. I haven't read these in forever. Hades has all kind of brought the nerds of video gaming together, or a lot of them at least, in its kind of universal, like, renewal of Greek mythology is a thing that people are getting super into. Not that other games haven't done that in the past, but
yeah.
Still, I think this game kind of blasted that wide open for a lot of people, and it certainly did for me, and kind of renewed that interest that we've talked about having as kids, or at least younger people. And so I was just like, this could be really fun, but I too did not know what to expect at all. And I've been like really pleasantly surprised because this has been, while a lot of work, also an incredible amount of fun to do. And so it's made it really worth it to me.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious, since you said like, I'm not sure how this is going to be. I have to sleep on it. Like, I don't know if I've asked you this before, but I guess you worked with me a little bit with like the Iliad project, where like all of the, like we got a bunch of Hades community members together to read the Iliad, and you were one of them. You were one of the people that I asked. Worked together. Like it felt fairly brief, but like you also know how I am outside of that.
Folks, he's a degenerate.
I am a huge clown and a huge
he is an
degenerate.
You're like you have major class clown energy, and You
did that
make
worry you? Like, were you
terrible,
like,
immature jokes. Honestly,
like, were you
I
like,
think
I wonder
the
if Wriste is just going to be like a huge ass clown and it's not going to be like,
I had like a very momentary concern about that. Actually, working with you on the Iliad project, as brief as it was, kind of keyed me in that you have the ability to be serious when it's needed. So that was, I think, less of an issue for me when I was thinking about it. It was more just like, do I actually have the time to devote to this? And am I willing to devote the time to this? I think the Iliad project, like, and being as much fun as it was and getting to work with all of, I mean, not really directly with all of the other people, but, you know, just getting to interact with all of the other people who were working on the project, which is a great group of people, definitely swayed me to being like, this could be equally as fun as that was, even though it's just the two of us. So, like, why not?
yeah, same. And that is a sneak preview of the sort of conversation we might
Yeah,
have
exactly.
in our episode
Absolutely.
25. So, so please, if you've enjoyed our company, pop in there. There will be another one after this. So
We
it'll be
may
us and
even have a special guest with us, but that is to be seen.
to be determined.
Exactly.
Anyway,
Um,
let's get this show on the road.
let's get the show on the road. Before we do, I will give our usual little content warning. As we've previously mentioned, we are immature human beings. We make naughty jokes at times, or innuendos, or whatnot. We use bad language. And the the Iliad, the Odyssey. I was gonna say the Iliad and the Odyssey. But the Odyssey has mature themes. There's violence, there is gore, there is hugging and kissing, which we get a little tiny bit of in this particular pair of books. So yeah, listener, be advised. And yeah, I will take us through a little recap very, very briefly.
Go for it.
Last time on the Odyssey, there was an archery contest in which Penelope.
Are you doing okay, Llama?
I'm fine. How are
Okay,
you?
I feel good. I feel good.
Am I not allowed to be silly?
You're grinning like a hyena, so I'm
I'm having fun.
Okay, all right.
I'm having a good time.
Right, and
I'm enjoying
you
myself with the content warning and then the recap. It's fun.
Yeah, and you also like you are in less pain now.
Yeah, I had a treatment this weekend, or not this weekend, but at the beginning of this week, which significantly helped my chronic pain. Huzzah!
So let it be known in your mind's eye, Llama is smiling like a hyena. Continue with your.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Athena plants this idea in Penelope's mind that she should finally call this archery contest. And she does that, and all of these suitors try to string up this, you know, famous bow of Odysseus, can't do it. And Odysseus finally asks to have his own turn, and they're like, no way, old guy. You think you're gonna horn in on this action and get to string this bow and marry Penelope? And she's like, no. He's an old homeless guy. He could never marry me. And so they still don't agree to it, but Eumaeus has already kind of brought the bow over to Odysseus, who strings the bow easily, knocks an arrow, drives it through all of the axe heads, and then finally reveals himself and shoots Antinous in the throat. And then the slaughter ensues. You know, all of the weapons that were hidden are taken to Odysseus and Eumaeus and Telemachus. They start slaughtering suitors left and right. Our boy Melanthius tries to get some, you know, manages to get like a few weapons and sets of armor and stuff to the suitors, who try and mount a defense, but are ultimately unsuccessful, and every single one of them are killed. And then Odysseus, you know, has the slave girls who have been determined to be the bad ones clean everything and take the bodies into another area, and then they are also killed. Nanny comes in to whoop over the carnage. They, you know, they purify and cleanse the house, And then all of the slaves come out into the courtyard to celebrate Odysseus coming home. And this is where we find ourselves as we start book 23, The Olive Tree Bed. And this book is one of the, I think, most talked about books in the entirety of the Odyssey, you know, probably by scholars, and because there's a lot going on.
I would also have book 19 as that. That would be my guess.
I think they're a pairing of books. And I was telling you before we started today that, like, I have been bouncing back and forth between books 19 and 23, and, like, have thought a lot about our previous conversation about book 19, because I think I originally fell down on the side of, like, we can't really know if Penelope really recognizes him as Odysseus, but I think the more that I've read these two books in tandem, the more that I believe that she does know that it's him. Yeah, I think so.
The biggest roadblock for me has always been that she returns to her mourning and weeping. That is where it seems pretty clear to me that, like, I place her in a sort of, like, limbo of hopefulness, like, between hopefulness and hopelessness, where there's obviously something about this stranger. The conversation she has with disguised Odysseus is very interesting and would be probably pretty unusual, like, for her. And she might have known that it was him, but again, like, she does, like, keep returning to, like, this state of mourning, which doesn't suggest that, like, she knows that it's Odysseus. I'm more of a fan of, or for me, the read that I take away from it is she suspects there's something about him. Obviously, he at least knows something about Odysseus, and that's significant.
Yeah, so there are things in the book that we're about to talk about that kind of have started to lean me, I think, a little bit closer towards the idea that she at least has an inkling that it's him. Like, I think I kind of agree with you in the sense that, like, I don't think that there's any way that she knows for sure. Yeah. If she does know, then a lot of what, you know, her interview in book 19 to him is about is, like, her kind of asking in coded language to get a hint as to whether it's time to do what she needs to do or not.
And also, she's trying to feel out whether he's trustworthy.
Exactly.
Right? Like, she tests him with, you know, like, the question of, like, can you describe my husband for me?
Yeah.
And Odysseus describes himself.
But let's get into book 23, because we'll get to the part where I think I'll come to the point that I'm trying to make here, but I don't want to do it without kind of giving some background on the rest of this book. So we start with Nanny climbing up the stairs, chuckling with glee, having just seen a blood-covered Odysseus.
Can I just say Euryclea is kind of a freak?
Euryclea is
a little bit of a freak.
She's, like, in a lot of ways, kind of my hero, because she's that, like, old lady who has just stopped giving a shit completely.
Yeah, she's, like, flipping off drivers on her way to work and
absolutely
like farting in babies' faces and like just
okay. Well, that I think is an image that I didn't want to hear.
that sort of attitude. I don't know. Not exactly. Like, not.
I was gonna say, like, it reminds. Have you ever watched the actual, like, old Monty Python and Monty Python's Flying Circus episodes or anything? There's this one where they dress up as the old ladies, and it's like an old granny gang, where they're, like, acting like gang members usually would, but it's a bunch of old grannies, and this is what she reminds me of. She's like an OG gangster granny.
Yeah, she doesn't like cringe at the violence. She's like,
no, she's
really into
it.
Which is, like, you know, a little freaky.
It
Not
is
like freaky scary. It is the month of October, the month of our Lord and Savior, October.
It's the spooky month. It's the best month. Spooky. It is the one month that is supposed to have the, like, cool hoodie weather that I love. Onwards in the Odyssey. So
she's chuckling with glee. So this works out for her.
This is fantastic. We love this for Euryclea. And she, you know, comes up to Penelope and's like, he's home. Odysseus is home. He's finally back. And Penelope, on brand as usual, like, no, like, you must be going crazy. You know, there's no way that he's home. He's probably dead. And she's like, no, seriously, like, he's here. He's that stranger that all the suitors were abusing, and now they're all dead. It's awesome.
One really neat little thing about this quick exchange where Penelope says, "Oh, the gods have made you crazy." Oh, there's my phone. Hi, phone. Our usual third
the
member
ongoing
of
saga of Wriste and his
We're gonna
phone.
keep that in probably.
Obviously.
But one cool thing about this little exchange is that Eurycleia hears what Penelope is actually saying. She says, "The gods have made you crazy," but Eurycleia says, "I'm not mocking you."
Yeah.
Which is not what Penelope accused her of course. And Penelope says, like, why else would you be mocking me like this? You wouldn't mock me, so you must be going crazy. But Eurycleia is like, I'm not mocking you.
Yeah.
It's a nice little exchange. They're on.
Yeah, they seem to be very close. And it's one of those things where, like, when you know someone so well that they can read the lines between what you're actually saying. And so it's definitely one of those kind of sweet, endearing moments. Shortly following an old lady cackling at a bunch of dead people. And so she says, he's the stranger. He's the one that they were all abusing. And Telemachus knows this, but has been keeping it a secret so that, the plan could go according, to what it was. And Penelope is really happy about this, and then kind of starts probing for information. She asks, if he's back, how could he have attacked them? There's just one of him. She tells her, like, I didn't see anything, but I did see him covered in blood.
Yeah, and she surely saw the corpses. I mean, obviously she saw the corpses when she came out and was like, oh, yay.
Yeah, and he, really wants to see you now. And, there's such peas in a pod. Her reaction is to immediately be, suspicious. She says, this couldn't have been him. It must have been some god. But this to me feels like her probing for information as opposed to necessarily believing that it's actually a god who did this.
I mean, it's possible. I'm not sure what she would be probing for. We already know that Eurycleia she's not a witness to this. She only knows the aftermath. Penelope is, to me anyway, like when she says in this part, do not start gloating. Some god has killed the suitors out of anger at their abuse of power and their pride. They failed to show respect to visitors. This is around line 60 when Penelope is talking to Eurycleia. She suggests that their foolishness has killed them, not Odysseus. Something else has brought about their deaths, and this presumably is coming off the back of Eurycleia saying, "I didn't see any of it, but I heard it." And Penelope is probably thinking, one possible explanation for this is like stuff happened, and you heard something, but what you think happened isn't actually what happened, or it could be something else.
I don't know. To me, it feels like almost like a kind of probe for identity, which is to say, like, you don't know it was him. You couldn't possibly know it was him, which is what then prompts Nanny to say, but I felt the scar. So to me, it's a little like, I see the side of what you're saying, and I think that could also be genuinely true. But I also see in her, like, and especially with the way, okay, so this is the point that I was starting to get to, which we're now kind of coming fully into. Because shortly after this exchange, she says, like, Nanny has told her, like, he wants to see you. This guy who is Odysseus wants to see you. And Penelope is like, fine, I'll go see him. And this is what it says. This is around line, like, 84 or 85. So she went downstairs. Her heart could not decide if she should keep her distance as she was questioning her own dear husband, or go right up to him and kiss his face and hold his hands in hers. She crossed the threshold, blah, blah, blah. So, like, I read this line over and over and over. And the reason it caught my eye is because it doesn't question whether it's her husband. And this is like one of the very few glimpses that we get into her mind. It says her heart could not decide if she should keep her distance as she was questioning her own dear husband. That is what started my, like, crescendo of like, she knows it's him already. I feel like she knows it's him already. She's deciding whether to trust him or not whether it's actually him.
I mean, I feel like she is, so this part, it's one of those weird things where, because remember, this is the poet describing this. So when the poet says that she was questioning her own dear husband, it seems more to me like the poet is reminding us of how she feels for Odysseus. Like the poet is taking liberties to suggest, to remind us of their relationship. I guess it could be interesting if she like is harboring some doubts or whatever, or like some uncertainties, like maybe like how Odysseus in his time away has been prompted to wonder and ask, like, has my wife been faithful to me even though I've been gone? Maybe something like that. But as we'll find later, like, the thing that flips the switch isn't a proof of like loyalty or what have you. It's a proof of identity. This book is called The Olive Tree Bed for a reason. We'll get there in a little bit, but
Yeah.
The bed is a defining piece. Is something that only he would know about. Is the way the I'll turn off my phone for the break. Is until then it'll make guest appearances. Like it's that sort of proof of identity that she's after. I
think it could be that, but I'm starting to think more. I think honestly, to a degree, it's kind of almost intentionally ambiguous. So you could think one way or the other. It leaves you as a reader kind of questioning, like, does she know or does she not know? And I think that almost kind of makes it more fun. But I think there is an argument to potentially be made that even the olive tree bed thing is a question of loyalty, is a question of, like, after 20 years, do you still care for me enough to give a shit about the issue of the bed? It is still a test of identity, but it is a test of loyalty, I think, in some ways. So, but we'll get to this. So, Penelope goes downstairs wondering this to herself, and Odysseus is sitting there by the fire and, thinking to himself, like, does she want to speak to him? And she doesn't say anything. She is silent. She obviously has kind of chosen for the keeping the distance and testing him route. And there is, a bit there where it says sometimes when she was glancing at his face, it seemed like him, but then his dirty clothes were unfamiliar. And then Telemachus, being a big boy now, is like, why are you not talking to Dad? What did he do? No woman in the world could be so obstinate, which is like
this is a part where like Telemachus, he's never experienced his mother and his father together before, and Telemachus scolds her, and Penelope says, like, I'm confused, I can't speak or meet his eyes if this is really him. If Odysseus has come back home, we have our ways to recognize each other through secret signs known only to us two. And Odysseus just comes right in and agrees. Like, Telemachus is totally out of the loop with how these two operate.
Yeah.
He's all like, oh, why? Like if if I met an old friend and I was like, yeah, motherfucker, and you're like, yeah, you bastard, and someone's like, whoa, what are you guys doing? Like why are you calling each other? Like, shut up.
You
like,
don't know.
This is how
we've known each
this
other
is how
for
we
far
communicate.
longer than you could ever understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's you only know your true friends by the ones that you can curse out and call awful names, and they will respond to you in like, and it is truly a sign of love.
Yeah, and the line after what Penelope says to Telemachus is hardened. This is line 110. Hardened Odysseus began to smile, and this is like he's loving it in a way.
Yeah, he's remembering
like,
now, like, why his wife is his wife. It's like, she's
like,
smart.
this is
I
Penelope.
like this. I like her. And yeah, so he's like, yeah, no, Telemachus, let the grown-ups talk, but also kind of warns him of what is to come for both them and us. You know, that they will have to make plans, because when people start hearing about the fact that they killed, like, all of the young Ithacans, people may or may not be slightly mad about that. As it turns out, you know, people don't like it when you murder a bunch of other members of the community, even if they were mooching off the big guy.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that these tutors are also like Ithacans. We talked in our wonderful discussion with Scott Rubin in the last episode that what was his name? Eurydimus, was it?
Eurymachus?
Eurymachus. When Eurymachus asked Odysseus to I can't remember what the exact words were, but like have pity or have mercy on his people.
And like, he offers to like remunerate him.
His people, right? So his his slaughter of these, they're not just like nameless poor peasant slave people who don't matter. they're like big name, big power dudes who,
right, imagine if the most powerful guy on city council like killed a bunch of the community members who regularly show up to meetings or something.
Yeah.
And
so like, unfortunately, we don't get the full aftermath of what happens here.
No.
As mentioned in the intro to this episode, you know, it's at least momentarily resolved fairly quickly by divine intervention. But like past these sorts of like little discussions that are like, hey, what are we going to do after, like, now that we've killed like everyone like we don't really get too much past that.
Yeah,
we'll get some of that in book 24, which we'll talk about.
It reminds me a little bit of like the end of the Iliad, where you just get Achilles talking to Priam, and then Priam getting Hector's body back, and then it's just like over. And you're just like, okay, but then what happens after that? Because there's still a lot that just happened. So like, what do we get to hear about the rest of it? And
Does
it's
Troy
like, no,
fall?
you just get that. This is what you get. This kind
not
of
only
happens
that,
again in the Odyssey.
But Odysseus has to like take an oar to like distant
the
islands.
whole winnowing fan thing, which still confuses me. But we will get to that in the next book. For now, they kind of briefly glance over having to make these plans. And, you know, Telemachus gets to be like, okay, Dad, you're real smart. I'm sure we'll figure it out. Bye. And, but Odysseus does kind of make a start on that by basically telling him to prevent the word from getting out as much as he's able to. Yeah. And at that point, Odysseus gets to have a bath and, like, wash all of the blood. Like, can we just talk really quick about how when Penelope comes downstairs and sees him by the fire, he's still covered in blood.
Yeah. Have you seen, you haven't seen it, but have you seen a movie called Mandy?
I haven't.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't at all.
This is a Nicolas Cage movie.
Oh, God.
It's pretty wild. It's like ultra violent without giving too much away. And I do recommend it to anyone who's listening. Nicolas Cage goes on a wild killing / revenge hunting spree, but at the end he is covered in blood. He's sitting in the car, and there's this we get a crazed like Nicolas Cage face, you know what I'm talking about, like,
oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But like, his face is just a mask of blood, and the lighting is like wild, spooky, and it's not really spooky, just like, you know, it highlights the goriness of him. And that's
a beautiful
kind of what
image, and that is, I think, a very apt image for, you know, this kind of scene.
I think Nicolas Cage should play a good Odysseus, is what I'm saying.
Oh, God.
He could.
Oh, God.
Don't tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, you're not wrong, but like,
It's impossible for us to tell what Nicolas Cage is thinking. It's impossible to tell what Odysseus is thinking.
That's just an image that I'm not going to be able to get out of my head anytime soon, and I don't know how to feel about that.
I want to see it.
Okay.
Any screenwriters
I'm not gonna
or Hollywood
lie,
directors who are listening?
I would watch that. I would absolutely watch that. Because
Nicolas Cage needs the work. Get him to play Odysseus.
No. Oh no. But this is how Penelope first interacts with her husband not first, because she's obviously seen him as old man Odysseus, but still, this is her first interaction with someone that is purported to actually be her husband in 20 years. He's covered in blood. He now gets a nice bath, and Athena, glows the shit up out of him. Athena pours attractiveness from head to toe. He's taller, he's stronger, his hair is thick and curly like a hyacinth. When I think of Odysseus now, who I really think of is Robin Williams, who's a very hairy man, and he is that kind of short and stocky type.
Yeah,
at least was.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the because it's also from that. Have you seen Good Will Hunting?
I feel like I have, but I don't remember it.
Okay, there's a scene in Good Will Hunting, and I'll make this very short, where Robin Williams and Matt Damon are going back and forth, and Matt Damon says something that finally sets him off, and he gets up and he puts his hand to Matt Damon's throat, and you realize for a moment how strong this guy is, and that kind of reminds me of that he's a kind of shorter, stockier guy, and maybe not someone like Achilles or Ajax who you would immediately imagine to be super yoked.
Would you say that Odysseus is DILF material?
Probably. I would probably say that, yes.
I mean,
especially with this description
often.
of Athena making him all tall and strong and curly haired, and it describes, as when a craftsman whom Athena or Hephaestus has trained in metalwork so he can make beautiful artifacts, pours gold on silver, so she poured beauty on his head and shoulders. We've already talked about what Hephaestus can do with a shield. Can you imagine how fucking awesome Odysseus looked in this moment? So I would absolutely say he's DILF material.
Yeah, and I mean, we also know, just to dig into this deeper, these two are fairly old, not old like Laertes, but a little bit beyond middle age. Odysseus is
on the back half of the 18 as far as middle age, would go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. But this is the ultimate glow up, and then he, comes out of the bath looking like a god, sits down in the chair opposite Penelope, and is like, "What's wrong with you?" It basically says, no other woman would reject a guy after 20 years. What is your deal?
So this is a 3-part exchange that I have specifically highlighted, and also what's happening. After he has his bath, Odysseus speaks, Penelope speaks, and then Odysseus responds. And even before we get the payoff of this is that we learn about the olive tree bed. We learn that this is something that Odysseus has made with his own hands, and there's a trick to moving it. He's no one, even a master craftsman would have an incredibly difficult time moving this bed, because Penelope tells Eurycleia to make the bed for him outside of his room, to pull it out and stuff, suggesting that it can be moved. And Odysseus is what? You moved my bed? That's possible. But even before this happens, I have highlighted are they flirting? Cause Odysseus is extraordinary woman. The gods have given you the hardest heart. No wife would reject a husband. Blah 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 blah. And Penelope responds, "You extraordinary man."
So this is part of what gets me to thinking that like she already kind of knows it's him. And this is more of a test of like does he still care about our marriage bed? Does he still care that, you know, these men were a threat to me, both like physically and sexually, you know, monetarily, in all of the ways that they possibly could be? Like, is this just about his honor, or does he still actually love me after 20 years?
I will propose a perfect compromise between our two reads. Both that she is testing to see that it is actually him, and for you suggesting that she's testing to see like where his like heart lies. And this is true of like Ithaca in general, right? Like when Odysseus comes back, he is in Ithaca, but the Ithaca isn't the Ithaca that he left behind. So it may not be that Penelope is like necessarily testing that this is Odysseus, but when you say like when you see someone after a long time, you want to like if you haven't talked to someone in like a decade, or like in this case 2 decades, like you know it's them, but you need but like you don't know who they are.
It's them.
Or like not so much that's them, but like who are you
Yeah.
now,
I mean,
right?
I think I honestly think that both of our reads still fit together pretty well. And it works both ways. But I think like also the request to, you know, make the bed outside of the room, and it's like goading him into being like, whoa, 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 who else has been in our room? Because I also think, and I don't know if this is explicitly said, but it seems like their room is really somewhere that only they have been in. Like, other people don't really go into that room.
I mean, I imagine the slaves do, every so often. One thing that I do think supports more of the like metaphorical test of like who Odysseus is as opposed to like the literal test.
Yeah.
Because perhaps she recognizes him now. She must.
Well, she literally says, "You looked like this the day your long oars sailed away from Ithaca."
Yeah. Is that earlier Eurycleia explained to Penelope that, you know, I saw his scar, like this is him. Like this, like if there's a mark that defines Odysseus, surely this is it. And Penelope's skepticism was boundless, almost. Like this, like this, like she was ready to explain this away as a matter of the gods' trickery. And if this Odysseus in front of her is indeed an imposter, then it wouldn't be a huge problem at all for like some god to plant this knowledge in their head. She even says, like, you know, no other mortals know about this except for you and me and this one other guy. So like, you know, there is someone else who knows, and like someone else would know. And so it's not like even a secret exclusive to them. The fact that he is furious about it, and stuff, I maybe what gets her more than just the fact that he knows, because I think Penelope could like easily like given just like the cold fact, like when Eurycleia just tells her like, hey, this is Odysseus's scar, she might treat like a cold fact of, hey, Odysseus knows, or this guy knows about Odysseus's bed that he made for you two. But perhaps it, like the way that he delivers it and the way he reacts when he hears it, is like the test that gets her over the edge. Because like, I don't know, like if Nan didn't tell her about the scar, maybe she would ask about the scar instead, or maybe she wouldn't even bother with the scar. Maybe she'd still ask this. You know, like their bed is obviously a strong signifier of their relationship. So how this Odysseus feels about it will tell her, hopefully, like what he's thinking, how he what has or hasn't changed about him.
Yeah,
over
and like the fact that he goes into a nerd rant over like how he built this bed. I love that. Kind of shows her that he is still like very much cares about it. Very much cares about his skills as an architect and builder. But more so that like he's so angry about this suggestion that someone could have like moved their marital bed which he like
Mm-hmm.
centered their house around, basically. Like their room, the center, the pretty much most important part of their house was
Mm-hmm.
built around the tree, not the other way around.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think one of the other things that kind of like keyed me in, or just made me feel like this is a discussion about their relationship that they're having, was like, aside from the kind of like semi flirtation and his anger about it, also the way that he says, but woman, wife, I do not know if someone, a man, has cut the olive trunk and moved my bed, or if it is still safe. Because that says to me that he's thinking about like that threat that I was talking about before, the threat to his wife, the threat to his honor in terms of like her being, unmolested by this entire experience with the suitors, or like whether she lets someone come in and cut that tree down and move the bed, and like how is it movable. So I just feel like I get this feeling that it's like an old couple talking about like, you've been gone for forever, how do I know I can trust you, as opposed to like, how
Yeah.
do I know it's actually you.
Yeah, and to be fair, like it's possible that like Odysseus's response is a little performative as well, because he knows like if Penelope is testing him, and she would be testing him, like this is something that he would say to do that. And if Penelope, even if Penelope knows that, the fact that he does know that in response to that, like he knows her well enough that this is what she needs to hear, then that's like just as good.
Exactly. It's
But
like
so it's like it works out either
it's the
way, I
sight
think.
of a truly dysfunctional but perfectly matched couple.
Yeah, these
I
wh-
think where I kind of fall on it at this point is that like when she meets him in book 19, she suspects it and almost kind of talks to him in coded language so that if it is really him, that he'll know to like give her the hint that she needs to start the contest, and so that she can
mm,
do it. And like if it's not him, she's fucked anyways. But if it is him, as she kind of maybe suspects, that like maybe this can be the end to it. And when he comes to her in this book, she knows it's him because everything that she was told has now come to pass, and she can see with her eyes that it's him. Euroclea has told her about, the scar and everything, so she's had enough like confirmation that it's him identity wise. But this is kind of that final unlocking of like normalcy in their relationship.
yeah, are you the Odysseus I know, or are you a
Exactly.
stranger version of Odysseus?
So again, I think where we both fall on this kind of complements each other in a way. Like, yes, there is still potentially question of like actual identity, but it doesn't mean that it can't also be kind of a question of like more philosophical identity in a way.
Yeah, like who you are changes. And a few times I've brought up the fact that we can sort of identify someone for granted. But we don't. But obviously they didn't have that. So in like a real physical way, identifying people is hard. But also like after you've been separated, not just by time, but not just by space, but by time. That's something that's a little bit more universal, right? We can all sort of. I mean, it's been a while since I've come into contact with someone that I haven't seen for a long, long time. But even like a short time, like a year or two, is like
It's
enough
a
for someone to
while.
change. And you're like, okay, like I know who you are. We've experienced this together, this time, but there's this gap, this relational gap, and I don't know what's going on with you now. So
Yeah.
there is like a caution that even like just friends who haven't spoken to each other in a long time might have if they're aware of this reality. Like
Right. And this is a much deeper relationship than that.
yeah, yeah. And these are
And
both
it's been 20 years,
wary,
which is a
wily
literal
individuals.
lifetime. Yeah, absolutely. They again are two peas in a pod. They are the
Yes, they are made for
suspicious.
each other.
Oh my god, that make me that made me think of the scene of Parks and Rec with John Ralphio and his sister like going through the graveyard at the end, being like, "Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious." Um, that I can see them very much as that. However, this is the token. So Odysseus goes through the entire description of the bed and how he created it, and his doubt as to whether someone was able to move it. This is what Penelope needs. She finally has her moment where she runs into his arms and kisses him and cries, and like it's really sweet.
I've the sweetness of the scene is weird to me. I think I've warmed to it a little bit more. I almost don't read it as. It's hard for me to read it as like. I mean, it is nice. Don't get me wrong, but like the first time I read it, I'm like, this is weird. This is a.
I mean, it is
like
the entire situation is really weird, right? Like, there's still a bunch of dead bodies in their household. There's, people
well,
going
they've
all
moved
over.
out. It's been cleaned.
But
It's, like
they
smudged
haven't
the
like,
house and
aren't they in like the courtyard or something?
I mean, they definitely go back to the bedroom and like have fun or
No,
whatever.
I don't mean like there's dead bodies like right where they are.
I guess I don't actually know. I feel I imagine them being inside. He's had his bath. So like that would almost certainly
No, I'm
be
not
indoors.
talking about where Odysseus and Penelope are. I mean, there's still a bunch of dead bodies like at their house, like not in the house where they were killed, but like
That'd be
they've
on the
been
property,
stacked
I
up,
guess.
like exactly on the property.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure, I guess.
That's still kind of creepy.
I guess so. I mean, that's all behind them. He smudged the house and stuff like that. So, but yeah, like their interaction is like, to me, it never really felt like maybe it's because to some degree I felt like they'd met earlier, right? Like they'd had they'd had it before, or like it happened slightly before Penelope is like, oh, okay, you're Odysseus, or just like the sheer level of suspicion and like Telemachus's reaction while failing to read the room, I think is like is like what most reasonable people would probably see this exchange as. It's like, okay, you've been waiting for this guy for 20 years. This guy is back. Here he is. You can see him. I can attest to the fact that he's there. The others can attest to the fact that he's there. Why aren't you like doing what a normal person would do, which is like run into his arms and like smooch him and or whatever, or at least like.
But he's covered in blood.
Well, sure, why not? And or what, and like we have to, even though Telemachus, as I said, is failing to read the room, this is like a really reasonable way of reading what's happening, just on like a raw, this is what's happening basis.
I guess
like,
so. I don't know.
Like
I kind of I see the other side of that, which is like this guy came here in disguise, killed a bunch of people in my house, is now covered in blood, and like, yeah, looks like my husband, but like, I haven't seen my husband in 20 years. You're gonna tell me to run up to him immediately and start getting all smoochy?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, she wasn't like wholly resistant to that either. Remember, like,
Yeah, for
she
sure.
was like
She wants to,
torn
like,
between
in her
the
heart,
two. But like, because Penelope is Penelope and no one else is, she is like singularly cleverly suspicious and
yeah, but
and
I also
testy,
think that is
which
like,
is weird. Like, don't get me wrong, that is weird.
totally weird. But I also see it as almost kind of like an anxiety-ridden moment in a whole lot of ways. So like, what is important to me in this moment, and why I find it much more sweet than that moment, is like, this is when her heart and body relax. This is, I think, the first time in 20 years that this woman has been able to like not completely be on guard and be with her husband in that way.
Absolutely.
So like in the situation before where she meets him at the fireside, but when she's going to test him, she's still like, her mind is going a mile a minute. And she's thinking like, okay, do I go up to him and kiss him? Do I test him? I have to test him. What do I test him with? Like, that doesn't feel as endearing to me as the moment when she finally knows that, her husband is back and here and hot again, total DILF. And and that, he remembers their bed and he remembers their relationship and he still wants that. And then she's able to finally relax and they are able to go smoochy smoochy.
Yeah, well, and as you said earlier, like this is like a dysfunctional relationship that's like perfect for
Exactly.
them. Which makes it's nice, but it's also like there's a degree of separation between me and that, right? Like I understand it intellectually, obviously. Like I know why she's thinking these things. She's told us. It's been borne out in the way she acts.
Yeah,
And all that stuff. Nonetheless, as I said, it is weird.
a little bit. I'll definitely give you
And
that. Like, it's not weird.
I mean, Odysseus and Penelope are both kind of weird.
They're both
in that
very weird.
They're blessed with a special kind of cunning that causes them to see the world in, as I said, like a kind of cynical way. Not in like a cynical, not meaning pessimistic, but cynical.
Yeah,
Cynical as in like stuff isn't necessarily like you can't fully trust what you're seeing. There's always some ulterior motive. Like nothing is pure.
This is also borne out in what she says, like right after she goes up and smooches him, which is she's like I'm so sorry, the gods have made us suffer, but like I was always afraid that someone would fool me or that all of these dishonest clever men would have fooled me and caused calamity. And she compares herself to Helen too. She says like that foreigner would never have got Helen into bed if she had known the Greeks would march to war and bring her home again. It was a goddess that made her do it, putting in her heart the passion that first caused my grief as well. Which I really love how she kind of ties it to like the grander scheme of like this whole thing started because some woman, probably who's a lot like me in various ways, was fooled by someone, and this is what has taken Odysseus away from Penelope for such a long time, and now that he's back, she had to make sure it wasn't yet another trick.
Yeah, and I mean, she's also making in a weird way, she's trying to learn the lessons that Helen has learned or would have learned, perhaps. That I don't know what specifically the lesson. I mean, obviously she says like you have to be suspicious of your passions. The things that like makes your heart go awooga aren't always to be trusted.
Right. Don't think with your genitals, which is very good advice out there for a lot of people. Like don't do that. It does not end well sometimes. Other times, who knows.
Like there's a grasp at agency. On one hand, she sort of lays some blame at Helen, that foreigner, referring to Paris, would never have gotten Helen into bed if she had known the Greeks would march to war and bring her home again. And she's also laying the blame on Aphrodite. It was a goddess who made her do it, putting in her heart.
It's totally right.
Yeah, and so what she's implying here anyway is that there seem what she's suggesting is that she, if she's mindful enough, has the ability to make these choices, even if these passions are implanted by some god or goddess. That appears to be the statement she's making. It's almost
like her saying, like, I'm still your like intelligent wife that you married all those years ago.
Well, she's making a special claim to agency against the gods, a claim that Helen was unable to or was not allowed to make. Perhaps it's hard to say. Anyway, that's what she's nodding to. I think she's saying like, I'm like doing everything I can to make this decision mine. And in order to do that, she has to like guard her heart and her passions like to an extraordinary degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, Odysseus eats this up. He loves it. He cries. They both cry a lot. It describes them as their skin being all caked in brine, which is gross. Um,
It's an apt simile because
it is an apt simile, and I do imagine them crying all over each other and kind of being caked in brine. But you're right; it is part of that Homeric
like when they
simile.
get. I mean, it's barely even a simile. It's like kind of a retelling of what happened. Like when Odysseus gets to shore, he kisses the sea. Surely he was covered in brine and exhausted and tired, but he felt great relief when he kissed the ground. And that is
you cling to it like it's your last day on Earth. And
yeah,
that's how they are.
That's what he's doing.
They're all weepy together. It's weirdly adorable. But this is, of course, when Odysseus springs it on her that their troubles are not over yet. And here's when we get back into the thing with the winnowing fan. The prophecy from Tiresias, which he glances over briefly now, but then says, like, let's go sleep together. And she's like, no, tell me about what he said.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I love because, like, it feels very much like a wife being like, you can't just bring that up right before we go to bed. You have to tell me about it. Excuse me. She's just like, yeah, I'm gonna find out about this eventually, so just like spill it. And this is when he gets back into
the oar, the
oar,
winnowing fan,
the sacrifices to Poseidon, and then he can grow old in comfort, which just seems like I feel so bad for her because it's just like rubbing in like 20 years of him being gone and her being like, oh my god, I'm, doing this test and I've tested you and you passed the test. Finally, we're together. And he's like, but wait, there's more. But she, I think, has just like given up and is like, all right, well, if that's what you need to do, then like, fine, maybe our troubles will finally be over. And then they bang.
Yes.
And that's beautiful for them.
And after they bang, Odysseus tells her all of the stories of what's happened.
Yeah. And it's honestly, like, it feels like a really kind of wholesome, like, first night back. They reunite, they cry together, they have sex, and then they have story time.
Yeah, and, I mean, this is a little thing, but even, like, if there was doubt about like the many tales that Odysseus told to the Phaeacians, this recounting basically confirms. I mean, I would have to. It's a high level summary, so I'd have to like check back. But it seems like everything that he said happened is here in this long description of of things that he went through. Is after like line 300. I found it really interesting at the start. His stories begin with the poet saying Odysseus told her how much he hurt so many other people, and in turn how much he had endured himself. And there is like when we were talking with Scott, and his mild to high sort of disdain for Odysseus, how it seems like he's okay with hurting people, or like people get hurt as he does things, and Odysseus explicitly telling like how much he hurt so many people tells us that like this is something that weighs on him, and this is something that like he's self-aware.
Yeah. And it just made me think of like the phrase that so many people use, which I always think is one of those platitudes that just like really pisses me off. Like, hurt people. But that is kind of like, it's a very big mood for Odysseus. It feels like he's gone through a lot and he has hurt people, and he is kind of impressively self-aware of that, at least at this point.
He's at least self-aware of it.
Yeah, I always wonder how much he actually tells her about Circe and Calypso, like whether he leaves out certain important details, such as I banged them both for a while.
I'm sure it's a little bit more complicated than that. But yeah, I guess I would be...
Oh, there's definitely, like, really kind of coercive and awful elements to that, obviously. And it says she loved to listen and she didn't fall asleep until he told it all. And then it goes through, like, a very brief summary of, everything that happened. So there's no real real way to know like how detailed
No.
the story is, how late they stayed up, you know, like how far into the night did this go? Or the morning, I would think at least. But in any case, he tells this complete story, and this is when he is like, much like she has that moment where she finally relaxes and goes into his arms. This is the moment where his heart is like released from all of these cares that have been weighing on him for such a long time. I will agree with you that like all of, you know, the things that happen in this book and their reunion do have this like really weird kind of element to them, but I don't know, this felt really sweet and endearing to me from that moment when she relaxes and goes into his arms until they like fall asleep together after bang and story time.
It's nice. I'm happy for
Right?
Odysseus.
Like you just feel like it's like when you get through the like, you know, scary scene in a movie where all of the plot resolution is happening and then you get to the other side of it and you're like, okay, I can breathe now.
For me, the most human reunion is in the next book, which
I agree with
we'll
you
talk
on
about.
that completely.
So as a matter of comparison, we can sort of juxtapose these two encounters. That
Although I
Odysseus
will say that one is kind of weird too, and like a little bit weird and fucked up in some ways. We will get to it.
It is.
We will definitely get to it. So they fall asleep together, and then Athena eventually brings the dawn, and they get up, and Odysseus is like, "Okay, I have shit to do. We have to, we have to take care of the problem of people are going to hear about this, and I have to go get more sheep. They ate all my sheep." Like ever the practical man. But first, before anything, I have to go see my father. And so he tells her to, you know, stay home with the slaves, lock yourself up, you know, sit quietly upstairs, don't talk to anyone. And he arms himself and the herdsmen, which are presumably Eumaeus and, oh my god, what's the other guy's name? I always forget it.
He gets such little screen time.
I know, right? In any case, the other herdsmen, and Telemachus, and they all get going. Athena hides them with night, and they walk out of town. And this is where book 23 leaves us. A perfect time for a little intermission for us to go stretch our water and refill our legs, as Wriste is so
there you go. You did it.
fond of saying. I was saving that for the end, just for you.
All right, cool.
So we will take our little break, and we'll be back with you all very shortly.
Hello, dear listener. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the first part of this episode of Homer Bound. There's more to come afterward, but I'd like to take a moment on this break to say a few special thank yous. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. Everything is produced in-house, on our own time, and fueled by our own interests. Sharing in our interests means a great deal to us, and knowing that others enjoy the content means even more. Please follow us on our Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just keep an eye on the podcast page, wherever you happen to be listening. I'd like to give another special thank you to my friend Llama for hosting the show with me, and I'd like to thank the composer and performer of the music you've been hearing during the transitions, who has said he'd like to be known simply as Llama's father. Thank you, Llama's father. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for some original art, and Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty also for additional graphic design. Another special thank you to our numerous guests for lending us their time and expertise, and a last but not least thank you to Dr. Daniel, who anchors every one of our episodes with his insights on our discussions. We appreciate his time and energy, and we encourage you to stick around at the end of the episode to make sure you hear what he has to say. Please consider reading along with us as you listen. We are reading the Emily Wilson translation, and while reading the text isn't necessary for you to follow along, you'll likely get more out of our discussions if you have. Feel free to pause and return later if you wish to do so. Okay, thanks for sticking through our break. I'll give it back to me and Llama on Homeward Bound.
Welcome back. We have returned. I have refreshed my tea. Wriste, did you get anything useful done on break?
I have a drink which includes purified water, calcium chloride, and sodium bicarbonate. A bottle of water.
It's water. It's a bottle of water.
It is, but you wouldn't have known it if I did not reveal it.
So now that we have refreshed ourselves, this feels weird. This is the last book.
This is it.
This is the moment.
How does that make you feel?
Again, as I said before, like, it's a little bittersweet. This has been really fun. And I'm also kind of looking forward for my personal time again. Which, you know,
My
like,
life
not
back.
not to say that I don't enjoy spending this time with you, but it's very, like, it feels work-ish in a way. You know?
Yeah, we've been doing this for 3 months.
We've
plus.
been doing this for a while, and I'm ready to have,
You've sacrificed
some of my days back to
2/7 of your week.
continue being a nerd. Like, I gotta get back into reading and stuff.
Yeah,
So.
and you know what? Earlier off camera when we were talking, when you were yelling at me, as you are wont to do,
I don't yell at you.
You were suggesting that I
you.
play Fire Emblem streams, and that
You should.
that you join me while yelling at me.
I object to being depicted as, like, the chick in the pair who's, like, yelling at the male companion. That's very, like, stereotypical.
I consider anyone who's talking at me in the same way that I say.
That's also a you problem.
All right, well, listen, it's the same way when I say, "Oh yeah, let's stare at this." Like that's just what it is. Reading or examining things is staring.
I am aware.
But I was thinking about it, and I was like, that is so sweet. You know, Llama is already setting up to spend more time.
You're giving yourself far too much credit here. You're giving yourself far too much credit here. No.
Yeah.
Look, this is not to say that I don't enjoy your company.
Yeah.
And that I wouldn't like to, like, dick around on your stream, because it could be extremely fun if we did that, and I just get to, because folks, like, I know nothing about Fire Emblem. That's kind of the point.
It's a great video game series.
It is. I'm actually quite interested
unaware.
in playing it. But I, as of yet, know absolutely nothing about Fire Emblem. So if we were to do this, actually, it would just be hilarious.
It would be better if you played and I yelled at you.
No. No, it wouldn't.
I think you know it would. Better, not maybe not better for you, but
perhaps
you know.
it would be better content, but I would hate it. So, like, that will not ever happen. There's zero way you can convince me that will ever happen.
For sure. It is a lot of work. And as I've said in a couple episodes, like, reading, like, it's not just, like, talking for a few hours a week with your bud, which it is in a way, but it's also, like, it does take, like, brain power and preparation, especially if you're emceeing, to which Llama has been doing for the Odyssey, and I did for the Iliad, especially to come in a way that, like, feels like you're ready to talk about the thing that you're talking about, because you don't want to do multiple takes of the same episode.
Yeah, but also just, like, I
fresh.
want to have a genuine conversation about it. In order to do that, I have to have actually read and thought about, you know, what it is that I'm reading. So, like, it's important to actually put work into it. Like, I wouldn't have done it any other way, just because, like, we wouldn't have had as good conversations as we have had. I think one of the kind of testaments to what has made this fun and successful for me is that it feels like we've both put in a lot of effort in terms of like reading and thinking about what we're talking about. This is also all
Definitely
stuff that
tried.
we are going to get into on our final episode.
Yeah, I was just like, stop jerking yourselves off. Talk about book 24.
We should, but I think it's kind of, this is a poignant moment to talk about it at least a little bit, just because this is the last book.
Yeah,
like we've put in all of this work. I remember reading this, through earlier today, like I do for my prep, and just being like, holy crap, this is the last one of these that I actually have to do this for. I'm not going to be doing this later. This is weird. Like, it's just weird when something has taken up, space in your mind like that. I think it's also just like, I don't find myself just thinking about it when I'm reading it again. I also think about it when I'm not reading it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And now there's more space in my brain for other things again. It's a little sad. I don't know. Anyways,
you'll find something to fill it with.
I'm sure I will. Book 24, Restless Spirits. So let's just hop in. We just left off with, the crew walking over towards Laertes' house, but this is not where we start in book 24. Where we start is with Hermes calling the spirits of all of the suitors who have been killed down to the underworld, essentially, yeah?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there are two folks who lead away, or who do something with like the dead. There's Death, or Thanatos, or what have you, who leads away those who have died, I think, gentle deaths. And Hermes leads away those who have died in battle. This is, I'm pretty sure this is correct.
I will take your word for it because I have no idea.
Yeah, well, and assuming that's true, and I'm pretty sure it is like fairly appropriate that Hermes is leading these folks away, because they did die in battle.
That's interesting because we had this whole discussion on the last episode with Scott about, like, is this or is this not really battle? I think we kind of fell towards the side of like, it's a battle in an unusual place.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
I'm not sure if Hermes' rules are beholden to our interpretations of what battle. I don't even know if that's like the actual rule. But they certainly
died violent.
It could just be like death in combat or whatever.
Yeah, could be, or just violent, unexpected death.
Yeah, and as I said, he's leading him back to the underworld, which we've been to once, sort of secondhand. We've been there secondhand. This is the first time the poet has brought us there.
We are now there firsthand, and we are seeing some of the same people, too. So we see Achilles, Patroclus, Ajax, Agamemnon. This is a cast of characters who we've all obviously met in the Iliad extensively, but also we have met them in the Odyssey through this tale that Odysseus tells of his time in the underworld. And now we get to see all of these people, I guess, like, firsthand more so. Although it is like third person-y because it's coming from the poet's point of view.
It's weird that we're here. In a way it makes sense, of course, because the suitors have been killed, their spirits have to go somewhere. It's a fine narrative choice to follow them. But before we engage with the suitors in the afterlife, we're sort of dumped into a exchange between Achilles and Agamemnon.
Yeah. Which I feel like kind of like this section for me backs up a little bit like Odysseus's account of these people, just in the sense that it feels very samey. Like it feels very similar to the way that he depicts them talking to and with him.
Yeah, and there's a very Force Ghost quality to
there is
to like all of this, where like I don't know what happens to you when you go into the underworld or the afterlife as your shade or your ghost. I don't know if you like really mellow out because you're here to stay, and so like the things that make you respond to things in certain ways are no longer there. We know that ghosts hold grudges. Ajax refused to speak to Odysseus.
Yeah.
But, coming out of the Iliad, even with like sort of their sort of reconciliation, it might be a little surprising to see Achilles and Agamemnon speaking like this.
Like on such friendly terms.
I don't know if it's friendly, but familiar.
Yeah.
They're speaking earnestly, or what feels earnestly anyway.
It feels less formal too. Like it feels like in the Iliad they're always like really kind of addressing each other in a very kind of constructed way, because
there's no politics down here for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's devoid of the kind of usual political talk that you kind of find them having in the Iliad.
So yeah, these are, it almost feels like they're different characters. I mean, obviously they're the same person. But like, Agamemnon, he doesn't have like his position as Lord of Men anymore. In fact, I'm
they're
curious,
both just dead guys.
Like they don't even, like the poet doesn't even refer to them with their epithets, which is weird.
Well,
it's Achilles' ghost and the ghost of Agamemnon. It's not swift-footed Achilles or a Lord of Men Agamemnon. Even though Odysseus recounted himself as using that epithet, or maybe or something like that. Maybe he referred to him there, but it's definitely not here.
No, it is. Their interaction is also just really interesting to me. Like Achilles says to Agamemnon basically, like, wouldn't things have been so different if you died in glory at Troy? But instead you had this awful like death. And then Agamemnon goes into like a really long and detailed recounting of like not how Achilles died, but like the aftermath of his death.
Well, the results of the way he died is what he eventually comes to.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thrust of this page-long, really, recounting of how like he and the Argives grieved, and how he buried Achilles with Patroclus's bones, and such and so. The thrust of it is like, you will live on famously, like your fame will live forever, is how it's rendered. You do not lose your name in death, your fame will live forever. Everyone will know Achilles. As for me, what good is it that I wound up the war? When I came home, Aegisthus,
Let's go with that.
And my wicked, fiendish wife murdered me. Which, like, it's prophetic and it feels true, right? Like, Agamemnon is known for, like, the worst thing that's happened to him, and, like, for, I think, his worst qualities, whereas Achilles, I think, lives on in our minds with a bit of glory, a bit of special glory that I think Agamemnon clearly didn't, even though he was like Lord of Men, favored most by Zeus, because he ruled the most men.
This is, I think, where I've come around a little bit more to like the idea of Agamemnon being a more human figure, because it really kind of sucks to think that he's remembered for all of his worst moments, whereas Achilles is remembered for all of his best, or most glorious, at least.
For his great deeds, for his great love of Patroclus.
Exactly, and the reality is they both kind of suck.
They both kind of suck, but they're also
but they're humans.
They're also both very human, and
exactly. Like,
I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I think this is a moment that, like, more than anything in the Iliad, had that effect on me of bringing me around to Agamemnon's fate a little more, and just the kind of the track of his story,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's at this time that Hermes starts leading all of the suitors past them, and they're just like, what? And as it turns out, Agamemnon's spirit recognizes Amphimedon, who is a son of his old friend Melanius. And he kind of goes into like, yo, what the hell happened to you all? And Amphimedon basically tells him, we were all, Odysseus was gone for a super long time, and...
Do we know who Amphimedon is? Is he a character?
I know that he is mentioned. I know that he was mentioned before.
Yeah, it's possible.
I
I
think
don't
he's
remember
one of
anything
the
about him
few
though.
suitors who are. I don't remember, and I think his importance here is mostly just his connection to Agamemnon. You know, him probably knowing him as he grew up or whatever, because it's his like his dad was his friend. And Amphimedon tells Agamemnon that they had started courting Penelope while Odysseus was away for many years, and she tricked them. He tells the story about her weaving the shroud and unweaving it, and she keeps, for 3 years she was able to fool them. They make her finish the shroud, and then all of a sudden Odysseus, has now come back, and they planned to murder them and succeeded. And he
Yeah,
basically just tells this tale in like, a kind of like, oh, we were so tricked, it was so bad.
there's one part. There are a few parts that stood out to me. First is the fact that Amphimedon says, "We came to court his wife, who had no wish to marry us, but would not tell us no or make an end." I don't know what that means. It's I don't know if this is Amphimedon. So it could be that Amphimedon is passing the buck to Penelope, suggesting that it is her fault that they were staying there because she wouldn't tell them no. I don't know if this is true, and she like led them on for some weird, otherwise I don't think unknowable reason, or if there is some other but
There's some blame shifting going on.
yeah, but I'm curious as to how that comes about, I guess. Like,
Well, I
I
think
don't know
there's,
if he's
the old adage of, there's always two sides to a story, and then there's the truth, which often lies somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure
yeah,
how in the middle this actually falls,
I don't know
but,
either.
I think it's probably fair to say that he's trying to make things sound more sympathetic to them. Just considering that, like, if a group of 100 guys overran my house and started eating all the food, and like, how much power would she have actually had to say no? Would they have listened to her at all? I find that somewhat unlikely.
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm curious again, like how that blame is even couched, right? It's like, she didn't say no, but like, was she positioned to say no? Is he cognizant of that? Is he just lying? Did
Yeah,
he
and
say no?
it's
Does he
also interesting,
remember?
like, kind of how he follows this up by being like, well, she didn't say no. She wouldn't tell us no. She wouldn't make an end. She did plan Black Death for us. She tricked us a bunch. She did all of these things to try and get out of it. And then, like, finally her husband came home and killed us all. That, it
Well, for some,
seems very, like, sketchy to me. Just tell that version of events.
I do think it's probably worth noting that, like, if you're a suitor in this position, you're not privy to all the things that have happened. You may
Yeah,
not be there
that's
for the
true.
whole time. You don't know everything that's happened. For some suitors, maybe it's just like it's probably not like work, but it's like, you show up to work, and then you leave, and you do your social duties, to try to court this woman who has possession of like all these great riches and wealth and power, and then one day some guy comes who is Odysseus and kills you. Right? It's
Right.
like that'd be a little, looking at it that way, that could be a little, could be a little messed up. It's also possible that like he got all of this information from like Antinous, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
that's
possible that
also like that's a
Antinous
great point.
was like, yeah, Penelope is like leading us on. We have to stick around here. Like that sounds like something Antinous would do. I don't know if that's true.
It very well
But
could be. I think there's a lot of ways to approach it where like he could either be kind of telling the truth or just completely covering his ass.
yeah, or he's telling what he thinks is the truth, but like isn't necessarily the truth. And like we can identify those things. Another one is, and there are almost certainly more that I haven't picked out. Another one is when he's talking about, this is around line 170, when he says, we said nobody should give the bow to Odysseus. No matter what he said, Telemachus alone insisted he ought to have it. That is not true. Penelope was into it, and
That's quite right.
so was
And Eumaeus.
Eumaeus, who was one who carried the bow, which is like a interesting little omission. Doesn't like change the quality of what he's said. Yeah, that's just another. It's another difference. I'm not totally sure what to make of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting though that like he does kind of implicate like things that are a little bit generally accepted to be bad behavior, like abusing a stranger that comes into someone's house that isn't yours.
Mm-hmm.
Because he does say that, this guy showed up at the palace and appeared to be a poor old homeless man, and we all taunted him and threw, insulting words and missiles at him, and for a while he patiently endured abuse in his own home. That's around line like 161 2. So it's like he's kind of acknowledging, I think, to a degree that they've done some shit. But trying to kind of make it not sound quite as bad as it ultimately was. And whether that's, him not knowing the full picture or him trying to cover his ass, I think you can work it either way.
Yeah, I didn't spend as much time like jumping through back and forth between books as it sounds like you did. Like I'm unsure how well equipped I am again to like unpack Amphimedon's recounting of the events.
I haven't gone through book 24 as much as I did the last book. I will admit it. But it struck me like as really interesting the way that he tells this tale to Agamemnon, especially considering who he is, and that he would have known who he is, and it kind of makes sense that he would be trying to make not as bad of an impression on him, maybe even especially knowing like how Agamemnon died, which I think is what kind of made me think of it.
Yeah, and
like couching it so that it seems not quite as bad, and so that it was kind of Penelope's fault. Like, you have to understand this wasn't like, what happened to you, dude.
Oh yeah.
I think there is probably slightly some element to that. The crux of what he's getting at is that, we were killed and our bodies are still there and they're not buried, and like we need our death rights. And Agamemnon's just like, oh man, Odysseus got himself a good wife. Not like my awful wife who like, conspired to kill me.
Well, and now that I'm looking at it, again, it feels weird that we go from everything that happened to Achilles and Agamemnon's exchange, which seems to be like totally disconnected from the themes. Like I'm not sure if we've talked about like fame and stuff before. When talking about the Odyssey, we've talked about it a little bit, where like Odysseus is still like very interested in fame, at least when he's like again giving the Cyclops his name and address. But like past that,
one of my favorite parts.
Past that though, it's not like it doesn't seem like a really big theme. But I think Odysseus or Agamemnon lays it out clearly. He contrasts his own fame with Achilles. He's like his mind is still there, and like whose name will go down.
Well,
right?
He gets to contrast his fate with Odysseus's.
Well, he gets to contrast Penelope with his own wife, Clytemnestra, and he sort of taught like his final closing comment is like your fame will live forever. You are a great woman, as opposed to my wife, who was terrible. She murdered me.
Yeah, I'm gonna read this out because I objected very strongly to this. Her fame will live forever, and the deathless gods will make a poem to delight all those on earth about intelligent Penelope. Not like my wife, who murdered her own husband. Her story will be hateful. She will bring bad reputation to all other women, even the good ones. Dude, what the fuck?
You have to remember, this guy was killed in his own home
I
at his own dinner table by his wife.
I don't care. I don't care. It's fucked up.
It is fucked up. Although, I mean, Penelope's, like, oddly enough, Penelope sort of is also sort of cognizant of this, not so much in in terms of fame, but like how
Yes.
people are. I remember like she talks about
Are you
Helen.
talking about like the Helen comparison?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And she
I think
is like
hers-
mindful of like this and what kind of disasters might come about if she allows her passions to drag her this way and that. And so in a way, Agamemnon's words ring true.
Differently. It's couched very differently.
It's weirdly. I'm curious as to like how it's rendered, and what how it's rendered against the Greeks, against the Greek. I'm like, obviously, this, like, if Agamemnon were tweeting this would be very problematic. But at the same time, he was murdered in his own home by his wife.
That doesn't
when he
make
came
it
back
okay.
from war. It doesn't make it okay, but I understand where he's coming from. Okay, he's obviously super pissed about this. It's all he's talked about.
It. I understand that, but dude, not cool.
Yeah.
It's also just that, like, that's the note that we leave the underworld on. It's just like Agamemnon being like, women suck.
I didn't say women suck. Like, people like my wife suck.
That's true, but it does, like, essentially say that this can be used to paint all other women as bad, and that is, essentially a fair depiction of women. But yeah, that's basically the note upon which we leave the underworld, and then we cut back to Odysseus and company, going to Laertes' house. And Odysseus basically says, go off, kill a pig, we'll have it for dinner. This is, the moment that I need to have alone to test my father. Still with the testing, always with the testing. But we know him by now. We know that he's going to do this. There's no way he's not going to do this.
Yeah, I even have that part where he says, and I will test my father to find out if he will know me instantly on sight or not. I've been absent for so long. And I have that bracketed off saying, why? Always testing. That's my note.
Always testing.
So I'm there.
This is the part that I found to be fucked up. So Odysseus goes out into the orchard and doesn't find Dolius the steward, who we will see later, and doesn't find any of his slaves or any of Dolius's sons, but he finds his father alone inside the orchard, digging earth to make it level round a tree, and he's wallowing in grief, and Odysseus stops by beneath this pear tree and starts kind of weeping and wonders to himself, I'm gonna read this out verbatim because I wrote next to it just like, what the fuck? Then he wondered whether to kiss his father, twine around him, and tell him that he had come home again and everything that happened on the way, or question him. He thought it best to start by testing him with teasing and abuse.
Yeah, I have teasing and abuse underlined, and next to it just, huh?
Dude, why? You're like, obviously, like, old and suffering father. Just gonna, like, stop under a pear tree, cry for a minute, and then be like, no, perhaps I should just tease and abuse him.
Yeah, so in one way, this is a little weird. In another way, this is very normal for Odysseus.
Right.
He's done this to all of his family members.
It's his MO.
Yeah. He's done this to all of his family members. He's overcome his grief and also, conversely, his joys to maintain his disguise and to test those around him. But this moment is a little weirder because this is past the point where he needs to test his household. I can understand why he would wait to reveal himself to Telemachus. I can understand why he'd wait to reveal himself to Eumaeus. I can even understand why he'd wait to reveal himself to like the others in his household and Penelope. But now that that's all past, it seems like the need for this is gone.
Right.
There's no discernible reason other than this is just kind of what Odysseus does. Like, that's the only explanation that I can come up with.
This is what I do. I don't know any other way.
Yeah, like, he can't approach someone in like a normal kind of way, or at the very least he can't approach like certain people in a normal kind of way. I don't know. It's so strange that
It
he
just
would.
it really makes me think of just like a dysfunctional family sitcom. It's very like a very Schitt's Creek feel or something like that, or like Arrested Development, where they're all just like weird and awful to each other.
Well, so it's like the best way I can read this is that Odysseus, you know how like we're familiar with like the whole movie scene where like someone is sitting on a park bench or in a cafe and someone taps them on the shoulder and they turn around and it's someone they didn't expect to see, but they're really glad to see them, right? And like it takes them a little while, but like it takes them a moment, like, oh, you're blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, it's me. And they're like, yeah, it's you. And that sort of stuff, right? And that can be like you could approach them and like a hey, I'm so and so. Your old friend. And you're like, but there is like sort of a momentous kind of feeling when you when the person gets to recognize you and say, hey, it's you, right? Like that feels good. Presumably it feels good for them. Probably feels good for the person being recognized. And that is part of what Odysseus wanted to test, right? I will test my father to find out if he'll know me instantly on sight or not. And so for him to come up to him being like kind of mean and stuff would be a like smoke screen requiring him to see past his words and look at his face, right?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It does make me think that like if this is how Odysseus is with his father, like putting aside the issue that he wasn't there for 20 years of his life, like no wonder Telemachus has daddy issues.
Well, he has daddy issues because he didn't have one.
No, I know that. I said putting aside all of that.
Sure.
Like it's not just that, it's that his dad when he does come back is like fucking weird.
But yeah, he true to his heart, he sort of like makes fun of him a little bit. Like he doesn't like it doesn't seem like he's like super insulting him. He's like, oh, this place looks really nice, well tended, but you don't look so good.
You look like shit.
I've got to silence my phone. The phone will be here to the end.
Oh god. It's fine. I do think the other really Odysseus like thing about this is that like okay, so once again he tells a tale filled with lies, you know? He after, you know, kind of doing he like negs his own dad. He, you know, like compliments the orchard, but then kind of teases him and insults him, and then tells the story about a friend that he met, and I don't know. He said he was like the son of Laertes, so he's talking about himself here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, is this Ithaca? Like, I met this guy, and I would love to, you know, I gave him a bunch of gifts, and you know, do you know anything about this? This is like the classic Odysseus weaving himself into his own tale of lies as part of him testing someone or creating this like alibi of sorts. It's very interesting to me. It's very he's still on his funny business. He's always on his funny business. He has such a like well-worn path of what he's going to do in just about every situation.
Yeah, like Laertes responds, you know, as described his father answered through tears, and he confirms like, yeah, you're in Ithaca. He doesn't know anything about the suitors. Well, he knows about the suitors, but he doesn't know what's happened to them. He still thinks that, you know, all is as it was. And he sort of confirms that, oh, this person you're talking about is my son. I am Laertes.
He seems convinced that he was eaten by some sort of animal.
Well, I mean, someone's body being eaten is like shorthand for their dead, right? Like their bodies.
Oh yeah, no,
their bodies made carrion for the
I love
dogs
that
and birds.
little turn of phrase of just like it has to have been that like fish ate him or beasts or birds on land.
Yeah, and then he follows it up by saying like his mother did not lay his body out and weep for him. His mother's dead. Nor I, his father, nor Penelope, his wife, a wise and wealthy woman. She has not closed her own husband's eyes or given a funeral. The dead deserve this honor. Which is like we've been there before. We've
Yeah.
we've experienced Priam, and his own grief for his dead son, and it's very much alive here in Laertes as well. And then he asks, "Hey, who are you, Odysseus?" Well, he doesn't say, "Who are you, Odysseus?" He asks, "Odysseus, who are you?"
Who are you, Odysseus? So are you my son? And of course we get lying Odysseus replies, I will tell you the truth completely, and then proceeds to lie a bunch. But basically just says, I met him. I would love to share gifts with him again. And Laertes loses it and grabs dust and starts pouring it over his head and crying. And this is when Odysseus starts to feel bad about that and actually reveals himself.
No, it's funny because, like, if we're to read this as, Odysseus is like, oh, I want him to recognize me. Laertes gives his response. He's like, oh, the fish have probably eaten him, or the birds and beasts ate him on land. He hasn't been buried by any of his loved ones. Who are you? And Odysseus, like, this, I think this is still Odysseus, like, trying to get, I think this is Odysseus still trying to get him to see that it's him without him having to lay it out to him.
Deeply misread the situation.
Yeah, and I can even see it like, it's like line 310, like, is 5 years since poor unfortunate Odysseus, and he like shows his like moves his face in front of his father, so like,
Dad,
just
come
like,
on. Come on, Dad.
Does Odysseus sound familiar? Like that's what I'm kind of imagining. Not exactly, but that sort of feel or vibe. Yeah, as you said, like, this is like Odysseus invoking his own name and talking about him even more doesn't get his father to recognize him more. It gets him to grieve for him more.
Right. Laertes is not doing well. He's been very depressed. And this is just like, it sends him over the edge. Absolutely. And Odysseus, like, is brokenhearted to see it, and finally is like, okay, it's me. I'm Odysseus.
After spending so long seeing Odysseus playing all these long cons, long games, and like complete lies, and like wrapping things in deception after deception, wearing his disguises and deceiving even his own family members, like, after the slightest, like, after seeing like any resistance or like downsides of his game in his father, like, he immediately breaks down. He's like, no, it's me.
It is in very stark opposition to his other interactions with his family when he gets home. Like, you can see how much he sees the pain in his father and how much pain that causes him. And as soon as his father is like, prove it, chump, he's just like, here is everything you need to know. I will show you the scar. I will tell you about the trees in the orchard and all of these like really personal details. And Laertes is so overcome by the truth of the situation that he faints into Odysseus's arms.
Yeah, I don't know. This was a very like powerful scene for me. I don't know. I loved it.
I think so too. I think you're right that of the reunion scenes, it's the one that feels like the most touching.
It's most human. We know that Odysseus is the way he is, and he has resisted, like, we've been told, like, all these times where he resists the pull of his heart to reveal himself right away, or to murder someone, or to like act impulsively, or act on these things that he wants to act on. And getting to see him like do what he feels he needs to do, like at an emotional level, not like an intellectual or like cunning level. There's no game being played here. Like, he's tried to do it, but as soon as he realizes that like this is more trouble than it's worth, he just like, hey, it's me, and this is how I can prove it. And I don't know, it's good. It's the most human we've seen Odysseus.
I think so. I think this is like the most kind of Like, I will say over the reading of the Odyssey, and especially since talking to Scott about it a little bit, like, I have become less sympathetic to Odysseus than I think I was when I read this as a kid. But I
Hmm.
also think that this moment kind of brings me back around to having more empathy for him and having more sense of him as, like, a human and a person who I can be sympathetic to.
Yeah, well, and there's the weirdness, like you say, having trouble having sympathy for Odysseus, and like on one hand, like Odysseus in abstract is a guy who's trying to get home, and he hasn't been home for a long time, and that I think like any sort of story with that sort of character has some kind of basis for sympathy and empathy that guides every action that they take. I mean, again, when we talked with Scott about this, he talked about how he's sort of coming around a little bit to Odysseus in some of our other off-camera talks, and even as we touched on in some of his episodes, he used to think that Odysseus was like a really horrible man, and since then, like it's never that simple, right? Like
Yeah.
there's like Odysseus has hurt people, but when we look at those, like in abstract, Odysseus has hurt people, but in like the specifics, these are things that we can understand doing, and while we hope we'd never have to do them, we can also like see ourselves acting in that same way, right? And from there it's
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that this whole, like, both the Iliad and the Odyssey have done for me is, like, I know reading these when I was younger, you tend to see a lot more of a kind of flat picture of these people, and you choose your heroes and you choose your villains, and you kind of get through the story that way. And this has made me see all of them as a lot more human, and just like any human, like, there are flaws, there are strengths, and most people are not usually all one or the other, which is to say people have a
yeah,
mix of good and bad elements to them, or not even good and bad, but like perhaps positive and negative. Um,
yeah, and they're
and
contradictory
like
sometimes.
very seldom do you actually get someone like the kind of the true baddie is, of this story in particular, maybe would be like Antinous,
Yeah,
who seems just like a total dick. But it's just, for the most part, you don't get people like that in life. Most people are fairly mixed in terms of like the good and bad within them. Not everyone is perfect, and not everyone is awful.
even with the suitors, like it's possible that one would read the suitors not as like a bunch of entities, but as like one entity that has all these different facets. Kind of like
Yeah, and
all of
then
our
you start to
heroes.
pick out, as you've definitely pointed out a lot, like that there may be some of them who didn't take as big a role, who like you can be more sympathetic to than some of the others.
Yeah, like some of them probably deserve to never see the light of day again, and some of them like are like in a weird place where they're like it's harder to hold this against them than it might be to say Antinous. Can't superimpose an Antinous onto every suitor who's there,
Yeah,
certainly.
absolutely.
And yeah, that's
It's like,
no,
likewise, I think you have to see kind of the more and less human elements of Odysseus. He shows both of those sides of himself. But this is one
yeah,
of those instances where it really is like a very touching human moment. It just genuinely is, I think.
it is a very human moment in the midst of like whether we want to call them godlike attitudes or if we want to like we talked about how Athena is eager to kill them all, but Odysseus gives a warning to what's his name again, Antinomus, uh the
Infinimus?
Infamous, was that it? Oh, God, I hate these names are so hard. The well-spoken
This is
suitor,
great. This is great.
like he gives a warning to his
Amphinimus.
well-spoken suitor, like his attitudes are like he's of both minds, right? Like he is both of like the Athena like mind of like I'm going to kill all these suitors, but at the same time he's like, well, I can discern sort of, like I can offer like this warning, or like even like when Telemachus says, hey, don't kill this one and this one, he's like, all right, I'll listen to you, Telemachus.
Yeah, sure, why not?
In the same
I
way
know
that yeah, in the same way that Achilles is on one hand able to just without blinking, like have Zeus destroy the Achaean army, because he's mad at Agamemnon, and on the other hand, when the embassy comes, they're able to move him, to like change the deal, right? He's like, oh, I'm gonna leave now, like, oh, I'll wait to leave, like, well, I'll stay, but only until they come to the ships, right? Like he like so there
it's
and
bargaining. He actually engages in some sort of bargaining, whereas before he was so enraged that it was so solid.
yeah, and there's that, self-awareness as well. Like Odysseus tells Penelope that I've hurt many people, like he's hurt many people along the way, and Achilles is able to say on like multiple occasions, at least a couple occasions, that I can't keep this up. Like I can't stay angry forever. Like why? Well, but I have to, because I promised. But like there's that Achilles' rage isn't perfect. Odysseus is like get home at all costs isn't like an unflawed like monolith of single-minded determination. It's cracked and it's complicated, and he does it. But if you read closely, those human and mortal parts are there. Despite Achilles' godlike anger, he is still mortal, and despite Odysseus's, I don't know if it's a godlike determination, but he is just as mortal.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's a beautiful little moment. They then kind of go out to eat dinner together, and Laertes gets the patented Athena glow up. He's looking younger, he's looking taller, he's looking muscular. Odysseus is like, wow, you look great. And Laertes is like, yeah, I wish I could have killed a bunch of suitors with you. Just touching father-son moment.
Yeah.
And as they are
a weird household.
As they're finishing up cooking dinner and getting ready to like sit down and eat, Dolius, who we mentioned previously, who Odysseus is kind of looking out for, comes in.
Yeah, Dolius is the father of Melanthius and what's her name? The slave girl.
Melantho?
Who say what?
Melantho?
Yeah, Melantho. Yeah, he's their father.
I forgot about that. I totally forgot about that.
Just to make that connection. We talked about I think Scott sort of foreshadowed this by, we don't know if Dolius knows that his two children are dead, and we never learned that.
Interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, Dolius comes over and is like super happy to see Odysseus. That is a really interesting point, given like how happily he goes over to him. It's like, oh my god, you're home, welcome back. Does Penelope know? Should I send a message? And this also kind of might explain why Odysseus is so cool to him, because he says coolly, it says here, old man, she knows already, do not bother. So like he's talking to him presumably knowing that
that's a very short answer.
And Melantho are his kids. It's like, don't worry about what happened back there. and I never put that together. That's really interesting, because I kind of wondered to myself why he was like so brisk with him. That might explain
certainly a possibility. Yeah. Well, we'll never truly know.
No, we will, because honestly, things like end fairly soon after this. We don't have all that much more to go. While this is happening, while they're eating dinner, rumor is spreading everywhere, and people are pissed off, as one might imagine. Again, like, consider like if you killed a bunch of members of a community, people might just be angry about this, and the, of course, chief angry person is naturally Antinous' dad. Eupeithes is what I'm going with here.
That works.
Okay. Eupeithes, who is inconsolable with grief over his slain son. Which, I mean, like, I'm not trying to mock a father's grief over their son. I'm just saying the nut does not fall far from the tree. Because his immediate reaction is to take up arms against Odysseus and try and kill him yet again.
Yeah. I mean, again, just to like put in perspective, this is a unprecedented outcome, right? Like this is a I mean, we talked about the weirdness of the battle in like a domestic area, a domestic space, whereas, you know, especially coming from the Iliad, we're used to like, you know, a sort of grand stage of dust and men and metal.
An actual proper battlefield.
Yeah, whereas in Odysseus' house, you know, we have like food falling over, people are using tables and as shields, and people are like peeking around hallways and running around to storerooms, and
It's got
you know,
very like Red Wedding-y vibes from like Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
You
I guess
know,
so.
it just has that kind of feel to it where it's like you don't expect a bunch of people to get slaughtered in a house.
Yeah, but more so, their actions, while they do have material, like when I say the suitors' actions, while they have material consequences, as the one suitor whose name I can't.
Eurymachus?
Yeah, Eurymachus, sort of nodded toward when he offered to pay for everything. It is a political activity.
Yeah, definitely.
And for a political activity to end in something
Wholesale murder.
yeah, sort of, would be sort of unprecedented, I imagine. Maybe not unprecedented, but definitely sort of outrageous.
I will say that it is somewhat hard for me to imagine in a society like I would imagine this to be, that like if the ruler of the land did come back home to a bunch of guys hitting on his wife and trying to take his kingdom, even with that consideration that you've just talked about, like I don't think a lot of people would find it that unjustified to take revenge on those people. I think you're right that probably like the wholesale murder of them all might be a bit extreme.
It's pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah,
It is
even if
pretty
Antinous
intense.
is an asshole. Like there's a. I mean, I guess I can't really speak for the time, but I imagine that there is like an understanding that this doesn't go past politics, or this doesn't go past you know, the domestic affair that it is. Like if you're there, you might imagine the worst thing that'll happen is that Odysseus returns and we have to pay for everything, which would suck, but we would have to because the rightful king is returned and he's back with Penelope, he's back in his house and all that, and he's back in power, and we did a big wrong, and we'd have to like reimburse him for it. So you know, Antinous' father suggesting that they get back at him in kind is very much in a weird way Odysseus started it. In a weird way.
Yeah.
If we're to make that jump from like political affair to like a full-on violent war, Athena even at the end of this book calls it like a war. Like I think what did she say? Like end of this war. Which is basically what's happening, like Odysseus against like those of the Ithacans who will take up arms against him.
I'm not sure I'm as sympathetic to that line of thinking. Like I'm
not necessarily sympathetic, but if we're to put ourselves in his place and examine it from the outside, not knowing like everything we know, that'd be like
I'm still
a little
gonna
messed
say
up.
I'm still gonna say that I feel like what the suitors did and the way they went about doing it, obviously not like as a group, you know, not as the necessarily individual people, but like I'm pretty sure people would have still kind of called party foul. Like,
oh yeah,
there
sure,
is
absolutely.
the political element to it, but there's also like the straight up like abuse of guests and visitors they carried out.
Sure.
Like all of these things that kind of accumulate. Not that this is known necessarily to, you know, to Antinous' father or these people who are protesting this, as it would be to the people in the household, but like it's still shitty. I think it would still be recognized as shitty, and so I don't think that like Odysseus coming back home and killing all of them should have been all that shocking. Like, if
I
he
mean,
was gonna come home, bad things were gonna happen. And to think that you could get away with all of this shit, and for the master of the house to come back after 20 years, and he's just gonna be like, okay, just pay me back. Like, that is a mistake.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm getting at is, like, obviously, I'm not saying this wasn't shitty or what was whatever, but, like, the way that, like, the channels through which this would be dealt with would be political.
I'm not
Like,
sure about that.
or, like, they should be political, right? Like,
I'm not sure about that either.
Like, Antinous has to pay
This
for
is
stuff and gets exiled, right? Like, that would be, like, the thing that might happen. You know, it wouldn't be like,
that
or
you can say that, but also Odysseus just got back home from a 10-year-long war that was started over someone stealing someone else's wife.
again, I'm not saying that it is surprising to us or even maybe to them.
I'm saying
maybe.
It wouldn't be surprising to them. Like, I think that's what I'm saying.
Regardless of whether
like,
it's surprising, this is vigilante justice.
Sure, this
which
but
is like a
this
tentative
is not
form of
something,
justice
though, that I
at
think
best.
they would have seen as something that should have been handled through the political realm. They're just pissed about it. Like,
sure, but I mean, I'm just
I
trying
think
to
to say-
I'm trying to
I
lay
know,
the
I'm just
foundation
saying-
for where this might come from, right?
I
It's
know,
like,
I don't agree with
and-
it.
that's fair enough, I guess.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't agree with it because I think for me, and like, you could be right, I could be wrong, who knows? But I think, like, I don't think that is a correct foundation for it. I don't think that these people would have had really all that much hope that this would have been dealt with in, like, a political, non-violent way. I just think they're pissed about it. Because
Perhaps.
it's their kids
know.
who have been killed, and they don't
Well,
feel
of
like
course,
it's
that's a
right to
factor.
kill a house full of people. Which, again,
Well, sure,
valid.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like, this was basically vigilante justice carried out on the population of Ithaca, without the Ithacans' input, knowledge, or what have you, and that would be like a weird thing to happen for the ruler of a place to show up and then enact surprise and brutal violence on his subjects is a touchy at least
It
a very
is, but it's also,
touchy
like,
sort of method.
the way that Antinous's dad also talks about it, though, is, like, very much in, like, we will be shamed forever if we let him get away with this. It
Sure.
still comes down to, like, kind of an honor thing, where it's, like, the fact that his son and the rest of them didn't really kind of get away with you know, taking the power from the seat, you know, of that household, it's going to be shameful to them. Because it's shameful. And unless they kill Odysseus, which would make it not as shameful, is to some degree how I read that, you know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not just reading him. I'm reading, like, anyone who would come. Like, it's not just him. It's like a good deal of Ithaca.
Oh, that's
like,
true.
He doesn't show up alone. And
No, he
as
certainly
with everything,
doesn't.
as with everything, we're not given the perspective of everyone. Kind of in the same way that we're not given the perspective of, like, all the suitors, and you know, they differ. And some of them are, you know, hot-headed, red-seeing, revenge takers, and I imagine that, like, for others, this, I mean, again, like, just putting it on his face, this is, like, a pretty outrageous and audacious act by Odysseus.
Although, I will say what happens next kind of also brings more context to this, right? Because the Bard and Medon, who are the only two people at the very end of this killing, you know, fest, who are spared by Odysseus, wake up and see everyone freaking out, and he says a couple of really important things. First of all, that Odysseus clearly had the help of the gods. So clearly, like, the gods have taken a side here. And also says, no, that's what he says. And then he says they fell like flies, which really does seem kind of like rubbing it in. I think that was the other thing. It was just like, damn, dude, They're already pissed. But it's kind of,
Well, what the old warrior
and the
says afterward.
is the one that I really was talking about.
Yeah.
Who says that, this is because of everyone's cowardice. Everyone kind of allowed this to happen and allowed these people to like do really awful things to someone else's household and disrespect Penelope, and you didn't look after your children.
Yeah, and as you said, it's possible that Antinous doesn't fall too far from the tree.
That's kind of the feeling that I get.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, it's clear to me that there are values here at play. And I think one of the greater values is like, even when the important person from your town has gone wrong, the rest of his very important family is there, and it's generally considered a no-go to fuck with them while he's gone and try and and marry his wife and eat all of his sheep and his food and all of his that's just, it's not cool.
Oh yeah, of course not.
And also to, alienate guests. Like, and think about this also, like, they've been alienating guests in the house of the most important person in this area. And bringing shame onto his house. Like, it's just, I think it would be pretty well known that what they had done was fucked up. I just think this is like all the families and people that knew them coming out and being like, we're angry. He killed them all. Why did he kill them all? It's like, well,
this is also remember that
like, what do you think?
Also remember that this isn't like just the families of the suitors. These are like he's addressing the people of Ithaca. So these are.
But given that there were like 100 suitors, I would be willing to bet that a lot of them were.
Sure.
That's a lot of families.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And Ithaca is an island, and I don't think particularly a huge one. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think that the fact that there are so many people in Ithaca who would make up the families of these people, and the fact that so many people kind of seem to willingly take up arms with Antinous's father, to me lends credence to the idea that a lot of them actually are family members or people who knew these people at least and were at least somewhat sympathetic to what they were doing.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, also, like, Ithaca's been without a king for 20 years, so there's always that, like,
things have been getting a little crazy,
like vacuum, and the whereabouts of the king is ambiguous for 10 of those 20 years. But also, like the suitors were kind of a microcosm of like Ithaca in and of itself, right? Like I called Odysseus's move audacious, and it is, like, it's outrageous. Before Antinous was dead, before Antinous died, I can't remember exactly in what context this was brought up, but it was like he or the suitors didn't think that someone would do something like this in the midst of like all these other people. Like Antinous had like not a care in the world. Why would anyone try to shoot him while he's like surrounded by all these people who are like in some ways loyal to him and of the same mind towards the same thing? In a way it makes sense to think that, because when you're surrounded by people who are of a like mind, you tend not to suspect peril. And the same sort of thing probably goes for like everyone else, right? It's like, yeah, like,
are you talking about like as he is shooting it, or as he's getting him to shoot Antinous?
Well, I think that was I think that was.
And they're like
part
you
of
shot a guy.
Well, yeah, I again, I can't remember exactly what the context was, but that was something that was stated by like the poet or whomever. That the suitors or Antinous himself did not expect to have violence set upon them.
I think it is from that moment, and I do want to challenge that a little bit, because first of all, the old guy that they've been abusing this whole time just leapt up onto the threshold, took off all of his clothes, took a bow, and then shot a guy through the throat. But also, the poet does say that those poor fools did not know that he had killed Antinous on purpose, nor that the snares of death were around them all. If that's the moment you're thinking about, that's the phrasing.
I don't think that's it. It's another one. we'll find it later, or maybe never. I know that's
Okay.
something that was said. Because it stood out to me that they didn't expect, like they wouldn't expect something of like violence of this magnitude to happen when, they very clearly outnumber those who would perpetuate that violence. And like the same idea probably goes for like the rest of the island, right? It's like his actions are audacious because he is on an island surrounded by all these people who are like aligned with, or the families of, or subjects of the suitors, or or any of the suitors.
Yeah, I'm not sure I read it entirely that way. I think there is some, like, I'm not saying that what Odysseus did was not audacious, but I'm not sure that it's seen that way for that reasoning.
Again, I remember it being said that way. I can't remember where. I'd
Well,
have to
in
thumb
any
through.
case, if you can find it, go for it. But if not, I'm going to sally forth a little bit.
Yeah, here it
Because
is
we
at the
are.
very start. He aimed his deadly arrow at Antinous. The young man sat there, just about to lift his golden goblet, swirling wine around, ready to drink. He had no thought of death. How could he? Why would think a single man among so many banqueters dare to risk dark death, however strong he was? That is what I'm thinking of.
Okay. Yeah, I still don't necessarily read that the same way as you are. I think that is just a moment of shock of being like, this one guy is going to pop out amongst a bunch of us and shoot him. Like, what?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at, though, right? Like, why would someone at such great risk to themselves perpetuate an act like this? That makes no sense. Like,
Because it's
because
their house and you all are in it
well, no,
abusing it.
it's not like why wouldn't you want to? It's like you're surrounded by, like, again, hundreds of people, like 100 people. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing how you're extrapolating it to their like to these people anger over the situation
Well,
necessarily.
the
I
same
think that
kind of
is a moment
audacity.
of
Well, the same kind of audacity that Odysseus shows when he does this in this environment extends to all of Ithaca.
I don't
Like
think I see it that way.
he's perpetuated this insane act of violence in a place that would punish him severely, which is something that he himself is worried about, right? Like
He's definitely
they'll come down
concerned
on me.
about that.
Yeah, and it
But
comes
I
up
just
multiple
think he
times.
knows that's because he killed a bunch of the children of a good amount of the population of Ithaca.
Well, yeah, the reason doesn't matter. The
I
point
don't think
is,
it's because it's audacious. I think it's because he killed a bunch of people
well, I'm
in
not
the
saying
community.
I'm not saying that they're going after him because it's audacious. Like the suitors didn't take up arms against him because it was an audacious act.
Right.
Obviously, because he's threatening them, but it is audacious, and
I know,
Odysseus
I just
is.
don't think that figures as much into the anger over the situation.
It figures into the shock of the situation. Like why or how would someone do, and that's part of what Medon is that what his name is? Yeah, that's part of what Medon is saying, right? It's like this is wild, but he couldn't have done this without the help of the gods. Like the only reason that he could ever get away with this is because the gods are directly on his side, because it's that crazy.
The way he says that, though, doesn't read that way to me. He doesn't say this is wild. He just says, now listen, Ithacans. Odysseus could not have done such things without the help of gods. I saw a god myself disguised as mentor, sometimes standing at his side, giving him will to
Well, the
fight,
the
and
implication
sometimes rushing.
the implication is that
They felt
these
like
such
what?
things, these acts, are audacious. Like you couldn't, like in the same way Odysseus wouldn't have fought like 100 plus men even in his own house, without like knowing that he had the help of the gods. That extends to all of Ithaca. Again, he's on an island. Like he's surrounded by those who would punish him, and even like Antinous' father is like, he should run, right? Like we should catch, even though obviously Odysseus has no intention of sneaking away to Pylos, or Elis or wherever, as Antinous' father suspects he might do, because that's what you would do if you're on an island full of people who would do this to you, right? You would try to run.
Okay, I think I read this a different way, and I think I read it a different way, I think, because of what Halitherses says after. Because I think the contrast to me of Medon and Halitherses is like Medon I think you're not wrong in the sense of like they do see it as an audacious act, but I
Well,
think
I'm more stating that this is an audacious act and it would be this way, regardless
right.
of whether
But
that is their
what I'm
motivation.
saying
I'm not saying
though
it's their
is that
motivation.
Halitherses is saying like this isn't so ridiculous. This isn't so audacious because your boy's done fucked up.
Okay, I think I know where the disconnect is. I'm not saying it's audacious because of its moral implications. That's what you're getting at. You're saying this isn't audacious because it makes sense that he would do this on like a moral principled standpoint. I'm saying it's audacious from a practical standpoint. He's doing this in a space that would be extraordinarily perilous to him. Like, just for that reason alone, like, it's the same reason why you wouldn't walk into a room of 100 people who are all like on the same side and you punch one of them. Like, because why would you do that? You're surrounded by like a bunch of people who would instantly retaliate, even if the person who you punched like absolutely deserved it. Like, that would be audacious, and that's what I'm talking about when I say it's audacious.
Okay.
From a practical, logistical standpoint, this is wild. And when Antinous' father says, you know, he must be running away, like that's part of what he's getting at, and that's part of what Medon is getting at when he says, listen, he had the help of the gods. This is how he was able to do it. It's
right, like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, so I'm talking about audacious from like a very practical,
cool.
action-based standard. Like, just doing it is whack. Right? I'm not saying that like
it's pretty fucking whack.
I'm not saying that like it has nothing to do with like the moral fabric of like what he's doing. That's
cool.
like another thing.
I know when you were talking before, I was getting kind of more of a feel that like the audacity of it tied more into the kind of political stuff that you were talking about before as well, and that like it was an audacious act to like carry it out, you know. So I think
it is audacious for the reasons I just described, right?
Right, but that is, I think the tying together of those two conversations is what gave me that impression, as opposed to that it just being an audacious act of like literal numbers, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. And you know, there's that from like the Ithacan's perspective, like it's audacious in the sense that they wouldn't expect that because something like that would be so out there. Like, how could one person
fight
perpetuate this thing, knowing that again, like going back to that little phrase at the start of I think it's book 23, when Antinous is or excuse me, not book 23, book 22, when Antinous is drinking his wine and he has not a care in the world because why would he? The young man sat there about to lift his golden goblet, swirling round and round, ready to drink. He had no thought of death. How could he? How could a single man among so many banqueters would dare risk dark death, however strong he was? Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, there's that what should be total security, but it's taken away, and that is like wild.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, they really have no idea the actual sequence of events that happened. They just know that all of these people are dead and have heard like whispers of how it might have happened, perhaps. Nevertheless, I mean, Antinous' dad completely ignores this and he goes and dies.
Laertes hits him with his spear.
You know, we cut to Athena like really quickly, and she's just like, "Hey Zeus, like, what are you gonna do about this? You know, are we going to like fix this, or are we gonna not fix this?" And he's like, "It's your party. You do whatever the hell you want, but like, let me just make you consider that maybe war forever is not a great idea." Mm-hmm. And so she, you know, swoops down, and as the guys come in, you know, a mob of people to presumably fuck Odysseus up royally. Yeah, Laertes goes absolute ham, and what is he? You said he like spears him?
I think it was Laertes who this is line 520. Athena breathed great energy into him. Laertes quickly raised and hurled his spear, and he struck Euphrates through his bronze-cheeked helmet, and he dies.
Yeah, so, you know, that's what happens. Although, we get this kind of cute moment where Laertes, Telemachus, and Odysseus are talking about who's gonna kill this guy, or like who's gonna that they have to go into war. Telemachus has to make me proud, and Telemachus is just like, just watch me, Dad. And Laertes is like, my son and my grandson, they're together warring over each other for achievement. This is so beautiful. Let me stab a guy in the throat.
And I mean, this is one last, we talk about threes. This is one last rule of three. Like we have we have 3 generations altogether.
3 generations of extremely violent men.
Makes me think of I haven't watched more of it, but the first episode of Foundation. You must be familiar at least with the Foundation series,
Isaac
right,
Asimov?
Yeah, Isaac Asimov.
Yeah, I love Foundation.
Yeah,
I have not seen the series yet.
Yeah, the TV show is out. I've only watched the first episode, and the only part of the Foundation series I've read is Prelude to the Foundation. That was a while ago. I really liked it. I didn't so much like the others, but I also probably wasn't ready for it.
You should try it again. I think you would really like it.
I might. But in the show, it had a same sort of deal. I don't know if this is from the books or if this is from anything else, but it was basically like the rulers of the galaxy or whatever they are like triple, like there's 3 of them. There's like an old man version, there's like the middle-aged man, and there's a child, and all 3 of them rule, and they're clones of each other. And so I don't know.
It's very that. It is very that. So yeah, Laertes kills Eupeithes, and he falls to the ground, and then Odysseus, and Telemachus start charging the front line, and Athena is like, stop this destructive war, shed no more blood, and go your separate ways at once. She addresses this to Ithacans.
Yeah, in the guise of Mentor.
In the guise of Mentor yet again. And then everyone is pretty freaked out at that. I don't know.
What don't you know?
No, it is in the guise of Mentor. There's something about the way that that's phrased that like makes me feel like it's more her voice than Mentor's, which is why everyone goes all scaredy. But it could just be that, Mentor is a very...
I mean, it would surely be her voice, but she is disguised as Mentor. We have it at the beginning of the fight, around line 500. Athena came near, disguised as Mentor. When he saw her, weathered Odysseus was glad and turned towards Telemachus and blah, blah, blah. And then, like, the last line is... last lines are, then Athena made the warring... Mentor. Yeah, Athena made the warring sides swear solemn oaths of peace for future times, still in her guise as Mentor. And that's just kind of how it ends.
The Odyssey ends really suddenly. Again, kind of in a similar way to like Priam just getting Achilles' body back, and that's pretty much how the Iliad ends. It's just a very abrupt ending where you're just like, okay, and then what happens next? And then what happens next? But yeah, it's so Athena, makes them all like turn back, and then Odysseus is like not ready to let it go, and then she kind of turns to him and says, Odysseus, you are adaptable. You always find solutions. Stop this war or Zeus will be enraged at you. And he's like, okay. And that is how it ends. That is the Odyssey.
Yeah, and I mean, just off of this final note, I think it's worth noting that there is obvious intertextuality between this story and like Orestes and Agamemnon's. Like this is obviously that, or pointing us to that anyway. And we know that Orestes, and I'm saying this with like secondhand knowledge, because I haven't read the Orestia. I haven't like read any primary sources on this. I just kind of know the story, but from what I remember, Orestes, after he kills his mother and her lover, he is disgraced. He's exiled because he has killed his mother. So obviously this is a different outcome from that story, where Odysseus isn't exiled and he isn't disgraced. But in a way, it also ends kind of similarly, because if I remember correctly, the way Orestes' story ends is Athena establishes the court system by which she tries Orestes and of course finds him innocent.
Rigged.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, like I guess that's the way this ending sort of makes sense to me. It it's in dialogue with Orestes and Agamemnon's story, and I would be curious to dig into that more at a future personal date, because I can't really say much more about it than that. That would be an angle that I would pursue.
I definitely see this as like, obviously these are two huge works which kind of, again, bookend each other in a lot of ways, but I also think it's just part of a like much larger compendium.
Oh yeah, of course.
Of, stories, which again, as you said, have that intertextuality and that ongoing relationship and paths that lead into other great stories. I definitely know for my part, like I will probably take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the Greek mythology surrounding this and some other stories that are kind of related. I won't be doing it anytime soon. I am ready for a break. I'm ready for my Lord of the Rings reading of the year.
Yeah.
Very excited for that, but this has been super fun, and it is an interesting way to end it. Like, I just think it's so abrupt, but it almost kind of fits, because where do you even go from there?
I mean, like, we do go from there, but
the answer is kind of a lot of places, but they need their own beginning in a way, or they need their own entry,
Yeah, we don't have those stories from the epic cycle. They're just like, we don't have them. We know about them secondhand, but the primary sources are, like, they're lost.
Very few and far between. So yeah, that's where we end the Odyssey.
Yeah, and that's where we end the
main
literary analysis part of this program.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, we will be doing one more episode to kind of wrap things up, to give some final thoughts. And
it will be with Dr. Daniel, so be there. We'll get to have some fun with him one more time. After, of course, his final tag.
Very much looking forward to it. And on that note, I will send you all into Dr. Daniel's final tag. We want to thank him so much for coming on this journey with us, for providing all of this incredible knowledge that, neither Wriste or I are really proficient in, but he is. It has been an invaluable resource. So Dr. Daniel, if you're listening, thank you. When you listen, fine. When you listen, thank you.
If you are Dr. Daniel.
If you are Dr. Daniel, we appreciate
if you are Odysseus' son, Telemachus.
Hugely. If you are indeed. And on that note, on to the final tag with Dr. Daniel.
Hello everybody, my name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad, and here I am with the final tag for Homeward Bound, episode 24, on Wriste and Llama's excellent conversation about books 23 and 24 of the Odyssey. First of all, there was a great discussion about the olive tree bed trick, and how Penelope's hesitance about whether she should be aloof and question her husband from a distance, or go right up to him and kiss him, led to her employing that trick in order to test his identity. The question arose whether this actually is a test of identity or a test of loyalty, or both. Like Llama, I want to see the olive tree bed trick as both a test of loyalty and a test of identity of Odysseus. However, I want to nuance that idea of loyalty by flipping the direction in which the test is going. Obviously, the bed is chosen as a very deliberate symbol of their marriage. This intimate object in a very private space of the bedroom that only Odysseus and Penelope and their most trusted slaves would have access to. However, the idea of loyalty or fidelity within a marriage in the ancient context kind of differs from the idea of loyalty or fidelity in a modern context. One guiding principle for all Greeks is the principle of sophrosune, or the idea of moderation, not veering to any extremes, and sort of charting a middle course in terms of whatever action you are undergoing. So, sophrosune when it comes to monetary issues, for example, means that you don't want to be dropping the dollar bills everywhere, nor do you want to be entirely broke. You want to have enough money to suit your needs and get done what you need to get done. When it comes to sophrosune in emotions, you don't want to be too excessively sad, nor too excessively happy. You want to chart that middle course, follow moderation. When it comes to sexual sophrosyne, however, and how husbands and wives are supposed to act within the confines of their marriage, there were actually different rules applied to the husband and the wife in terms of who they could sleep with and who they couldn't. In this very patriarchal society, the wife was expected to sleep only with her husband. The husband, however, was able to have sex with anybody outside of the marriage who was not a freeborn citizen. In the sort of extended fantastic world of the Odyssey, this means that Odysseus can fully within his rights sleep with divine figures like Calypso or Circe. The bed then may get activated as a test of Odysseus' emotional loyalty, but when we're talking about the bed as a sexual symbol, a place where husband and wife consummate their marriage, I want to suggest that it's actually a proof of Penelope's loyalty, the fact that nobody other than her has occupied this bed in the past 20 years. On that note of the emotional loyalty or the emotional connection between Penelope and Odysseus, there's another concept that gets activated in this scene, one that pervades the entire work, that of homophrosyne, or the idea of like-mindedness, the sharing of certain qualities between a pair like Penelope and Odysseus. Odysseus is characterized from the get-go as a very resourceful, crafty, and even tricky sort of character. In the very first line of the proem, he's described as polutropon andra, as a man of many ways, or a man of many turns. Homophrosyne that is shared between Odysseus and Penelope means that as Odysseus is clever, so is Penelope. This concept of Penelope's cleverness is evidenced very early on in the epic, when there's reference to Penelope's weaving the burial shroud for Laertes, Odysseus' father, that she unravels every night in order to trick the suitors and to buy herself more time. The idea of homophrosyne, or like-mindedness, means that Penelope shares this trait of cleverness with her husband Odysseus, such that any trick that he can dream up, she can match, wit for wit, trick for trick. This cleverness or wisdom, or in a negative light, trickery or skepticism, protects Penelope in circumstances where she could really get hurt. For example, here in Book 23, when she's faced with a man who purports to be her husband, a claim that has been made to her over and over again over the past 20 years. The thing to keep in mind is that it has been 20 years since she has seen her husband last, and back in ancient times there was no Instagram, there were no camera roll videos to remind us of somebody's face or their voice or their mannerisms. Penelope's suspicion is fully warranted here, and she uses her cleverness, a trait that she shares with her husband Odysseus, to test out who he really is. Then in Book 24, there was a discussion about the opening with Hermes leading the souls of the suitors down into the underworld. Hermes is the god of messengers and boundaries, so perhaps it makes sense that he also fulfills the role of a psychopomp in ancient Greek culture, a psychopomp being one who leads the souls of the dead into the underworld, traversing the boundary between the living world and the underworld. Thanatos, the god of death, also functions often as a psychopomp, and the two, Thanatos and Hermes, who are often portrayed as twins, often work in concert. For example, think back to Book 16 of the Iliad, wherein they were sent by both Zeus and Apollo to bring Sarpedon, the son of Zeus, back to Lycia after he had died. More generally, however, Book 24 is a really weird part of the Odyssey, and a very strange note to end the entire epic on. It begins with this weird camera shift down into the underworld, where we have gossipy underworld discussions between shades in a way that is not very common to depict in ancient literature. There are also some stylistic features and detailed features that make it inconsistent with the rest of the epic as a whole. For example, Llama and Wriste point out features like a lack of epithets for familiar characters and some changing of details from previous plot points. It also ends very abruptly. As soon as the suitors' families make their way to Odysseus' house and they begin to fight a little bit, Athena shuts the entire thing down, and that's where the entire epic ends. It's a rather unsatisfying resolution to the story that, for all intents and purposes, ended when Penelope and Odysseus got reunited. And this idea that Book 24 seems inconsistent with the rest of the Odyssey, this idea has given rise to some scholars positing that Book 24 is not even a genuine part of the Odyssey to begin with. However, we have to pay attention to the fact that lip service has already been paid to the events of Book 24 earlier on. For example, in Book 23, Odysseus tells Telemachus explicitly to get the bard and the slaves to pretend that everything's fine and that some sort of wedding is happening on his estate. This is meant to be a pretense to prevent anybody from realizing that the suitors have been killed. Perhaps we can appeal to things like oral tradition to explain away things like the stylistic inconsistencies and the changes in details, but Book 24 undoubtedly gives us an important piece of the puzzle to finalize the story in the Odyssey, and to tie up any loose ends. Two more points that I want to touch on. First of all, when Odysseus finally meets his father again after 20 long years, at around line 240 of Book 24, he's depicted as thinking it, quote-unquote, best to start by testing Laertes with teasing and abuse. As Llama notes, this is kind of messed up. The Greek here is pretty unambiguous, kertomios epesin, with abusive or belittling words. But perhaps one way to read this is not necessarily as invective or abuse, but as maybe perhaps a good-natured ribbing between a son and his father. When Odysseus finally does speak to Laertes, he opens with a little bit of belittling or a little bit of ribbing about his physical appearance. "You're kind of looking shabby there, Dad." So perhaps some good-natured ribbing as opposed to outright insulting. Another interesting feature ties this scene explicitly to Penelope thinking about whether to interrogate or to kiss Odysseus in Book 23. In Book 23, around lines 86 and following, Penelope wonders whether she should either question her husband with the verb ex ere einoi, which means to inquire into somebody, or whether to kiss him, using the verb kuneo, which means to kiss. Here in Book 24, at line 235 and following, we have Odysseus wondering whether he should, 1, go up and kiss his father with the verb kuneo, or to question him with the verb ex ere oito, which is etymologically related to the verb used in Penelope's passage. There's a sort of chiastic structure here, an ABBA structure, wherein we go from question to kiss to hug. And the connection between these two scenes via their lexical affinities indicates that there's a similar test here at work. As Wriste notes, though, there's really no need for this. Why is he testing his own father? Perhaps this is a test of a different kind of loyalty. Can a father still recognize his son after 20 years away? Is that bond still that powerful? Perhaps this was a test that was destined to fail, however, seeing how Odysseus can craft lies that seem like the truth, as evidenced by Laertes breaking down in tears. One final point regarding Orestes and the Oresteia. The story of Orestes, the son who came back from exile to kill his own mother, Clytemnestra, for killing his father, Agamemnon, is immortalized in Aeschylus's trilogy of plays called the Oresteia. In this trilogy, the first play, the Agamemnon, depicts Agamemnon's return home from the Trojan War and his death at the hands of his wife Clytemnestra. The second play of the three, The Libation Bearers, dramatizes Orestes' return from exile to kill his mother Clytemnestra for what she did to his father, Agamemnon. The third play, The Eumenides, dramatizes the way that the Furies torment Orestes. The Furies are divine figures who punish human transgressions, including the killing of family members, and the act of matricide, as Orestes had performed against Clytemnestra. So, Orestes then gets put on trial for killing his mother. At the end of the play, the votes are tied as to whether to acquit or find guilty Orestes, and it's Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who casts the deciding vote. So, as Wriste notes, there's a very obvious connection between these stories, not only in terms of theme, but also in terms of characters, where Athena functions as a quite literal dea ex machina figure to resolve that which humans cannot resolve on their own. The intervention of Athena prevents future cycles of violence from occurring, both in the Oresteia and here in the Odyssey. Alright, that's about all I have, so for the final time, I'm going to toss it back now to Llama and Wriste.
Thank you once again, Dr. Daniel, for your time and insight. Always enjoy hearing what you have to say about our discussions, and thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you'll take the opportunity to read along with us, since there's plenty to love in these stories, and please keep an eye out for our follow-up episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us now. We hope to see you in the next episode. See you then.